This is the January 28th, 2020 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Our first item is meeting minutes. Move to approve. Second. Second. Any comments?
Yes. One correction, it was voted, the one I abstained on, Bin Restaurant, it said that Mr. DiGiacomo voted in my place and he didn't. It was 601.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I got it.
601. 1243 Post Road.
Jim's got it. Any other comments on the minutes? We'll take a vote to approve with that change. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Item passed. The next item is old business, and this is 980 High Street.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, under old business, items A, B, and C are essentially all the same application. On your table, I've provided you a couple of reference court cases for you to take a look at. This is the first time that some of you have acted on an affordable housing application, so I thought it was important. The first case, Berwick Fairchild Associates versus the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, is a Fairfield case. And I just wanted to direct your attention to page 1 of that decision, and moving on to page 2, there's a good description on what the standard of review is for an affordable housing application and how it differs from a normal TPZ application. So that's something we should consider in terms of, as you probably all know, under an appeal taken under this section, the burden's on the commission to prove based on evidence in the record that the decision are based on reasons cited for the decisions are supported by sufficient evidence in the record. And then there's this case kind of details. The facts of this particular case aren't as important as the process of reaching the decision, which I wanted you to see. And lastly, there's a notation on the back in the very last page of this case, I believe on the final page, where it talks about, and that's the example that we have in this case, that it's not required, the law does not require an amendment to the zoning regulations or a change in zoning to approve an affordable housing application. So that's relevant to this case. So that's one reference case. The second case I provided was a case that was referenced in the opposition brief that was submitted last time as Carr versus Planning and Zoning Commission. And I think there's a couple elements in Carr that are important in this High Street case, in that we have a wetlands decision here that was unfavorable to the applicant. In this case, talks about on pages 13 and 14 is that the decision of a Conservation Commission denying a wetlands application gets more deference in an affordable housing application than it does in a regular application. So that has some relevance to this case. So I would direct your attention to pages 14, 15, and 16 in particular on that case. There have been a number of matters that have been raised here. We've got an intervention. We've got pending litigation on the wetlands issue. And quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, in preparation for our POCD workshops that are kicking off tomorrow, I've not had an opportunity to provide you the full staff report that we typically would. We would like a little more time to digest the legal issues that are surrounding this case to make a more cogent recommendation to you. So I'm not making a motion, but I think it might be prudent to table this matter until the next meeting.
Thank you.
I would make a motion to table.
Mr. Levy seconds. Any discussion?
I mean, just simply based on what Mr. Wen had said, and I myself would like some more time to consider the application.
And I would say that all of these are relevant to the same application, items A, B, and C. So I think one motion to table would be sufficient for all three of those items.
Right. I agree Mr. Noonan, and we're missing some commission members as well. We'll do that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? That item carries. So now we move to compliances. 536 Post Road, zoning compliance application of Core States Group for facade modifications to an existing McDonald's.
Okay, this application is regarding the McDonald's at the Post Road Traffic Circle. There's a set of plans in your file and also kind of two sets of photographs. The set of photographs that shows kind of the mansard type roof is the existing condition of the building. Pictures from 3 out of the 4 sides of the existing building. This photograph is kind of submitted for reference to the color scheme that they're looking to do. But essentially what they're proposing to do is take off the mansard eave overhang and straighten up the walls with a new, paint the brick, put a little bit of parapet that's 2 feet higher than the existing parapet around it. No change in the footprint or site plan of this building, but to try to modernize the the facade treatment. All the windows are going to be in the same location. The play place that's existing inside that space now is going to be removed. In that area is going to be interior reconfiguring of the floor plan will add more seating, but the patron area remains the same. So there's no exterior site plan changes. The only exterior changes proposed is to taking off the mansard look and going to a more their newer prototype.
Which is the new facade picture or drawing?
The drawings are
This one.
Oh, I see.
you've got on the larger sheets floor plans and proposed elevation plans that are in black and white. And I asked them to supply a representative kind of what the color scheme would look like, and that's what that photo is for.
Do we need a public hearing for this?
It's not required. If you think it warrants it, that is entirely within your discretion to kick it to public hearing.
Can we have a motion that we can discuss?
Move to approve.
Okay.
See, I had 2 questions. The,
Excuse me, I can't hear. I'm
when
sorry.
the bathrooms are going to be made ADA compliant?
Yes.
Okay, because the men's room doesn't have a baby changing table. And then secondly, this, people said this area leading down to the bathrooms is very cold where there are tables, but they're taking out the wall to the play space, so I would assume the whole thing's going to be opened up and heated properly?
I would hope so, but that's not really part of our, part of our regulatory
It
authority.
seems like it's unheated, that whole corridor, but they have tables there. It isn't just a way to get to the restaurants.
Again, I presume that would be the case, but again, that's not part of the overall review. They are reconfiguring this, so there will be seating in there, which now is that kind of that playground equipment, if you will. I can't
Yeah, there is
speak to how
seating.
it's going to be heated.
There is seating in the place I'm
Right.
talking about. But when they open it up,
Anything else? Anyone else?
Yeah. I might not have, I'm having trouble hearing what people are saying, but is there any additional seating? And if so, does that change the parking requirements?
I don't know what the seating count is off the top of my head, but the seating count doesn't drive the parking count. It's based on the total patron floor area.
Okay.
So the patron floor area remains the same under this. They are removing some of the seats immediate to where the ordering counter is, and are adding seats in the area in which some of that equipment, that playground equipment is. So there may be a handful of additional seats, but what prevails for the parking calculation is the total square footage of the customer space.
Thank you.
I actually think there are a lot of additional seats, but it doesn't matter. Right.
Mr. Wendt, does it comply with our regulations as you see it?
It does, yes.
Mr. Levy?
There appears to be no change in the square footage. I think the change in the facade is an improvement, and I don't see any need for a public hearing, and based upon that, I, would approve this plan.
With regard to the baby changing station, is that part of ADA?
To be honest with you, I don't know. It's part of the building code requirement. I don't know whether that's a requirement, or if it is, this renovation would be triggered through the building permit. That's not anything that's within our purview.
Any other discussion? So we're voting to approve this. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that's approved unanimously. Our next item is a public hearing. 1381 through 1405 Stilson Road. Request of Trudell Homes LLC for 100% release of a $59,170 bond.
Hello, George Trudell of Trudell Homes, offices at 48 South Main Street, Newtown, Connecticut. I'd just like to formally request a release of 100% release of the bond for subdivision improvements on the properties of 1381 and 1405 Stilson Road. Work is complete.
And we have a letter from Laura Pooley confirming that she considers that a 100% release is appropriate. Let me just ask staff for a second. Can we vote on this now?
You first need to ask if there's any
public
that wants to participate, but voting on it is entirely up to you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the Ross subdivision, though?
Yes.
That is correct.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment? All right, so I'm closing this public hearing. For our commission members, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
Based on the representations from the applicant and Ms. Pooley, I see no reason to deny.
And I agree. Can we vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approved unanimously. And so now we move to 15 through 21 Beacon View Drive zoning compliance application of John and Dillon LLC for a 20-unit residential development pursuant to section 830G.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is John Fallon. I'm an attorney here in Fairfield, and I'm pleased to be representing the applicant tonight. The managing member is Mr. Sammy Pollack, who is seated in the front row, and I'll be speaking a little bit more about Sammy as we move through this. He's obviously a well-regarded local businessman, property owner, and a resident, long-term resident of the immediate neighborhood. The proposal before you tonight is to construct a 20-unit multifamily residential development at the property located at 15-21 Beacon View Drive. I would note, and the Commission should be aware, that a prior application was filed about a year ago seeking approval of a 27-unit development in an effort to address concerns raised by some of the neighbors and the Affordable Housing Committee. That application was withdrawn, and this revised proposal of 20 units was refiled. The development will consist of 18 one-bedroom and 2 studio units. It is a proposal that is submitted to you pursuant to the provisions of the Connecticut Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act, Section 8-30G. We'll talk a little bit about that and the implications and importance of that presently. You will note in our package of materials that an affordability plan has been submitted in accordance with the statute and is found at pages 3 through 24 of our bound application package. You'll also note that although it is not required by statute, the affordability plan calls for one of the units to be ADA compliant. Now, the compliance with the statute requires, as the commission is probably aware, that certain number of units are dedicated for a 40-year period under a covenant of affordability. So that means in this particular case, 6 units will be designated as affordable. In accordance with the statutes, 3 units, and this is all detailed in the affordability plan, will be reserved for persons earning less than 60% of the statewide median income, and 3 of the units will be reserved for persons earning less than 80% of the statewide median income. The balance of the units, 14, will be market-based. Based upon the experience that I have seen and other developers have had here in Fairfield with regard to similar proposals approved by this commission, we see that generally speaking, the affordable and the market rate units are generally occupied by people who are over 50 years of age and/or younger people who want to stay in or reside in Fairfield. We also see that these units are particularly attractive to individuals with regard to workforce housing, teachers, police, fire, and so on and so forth. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the need for affordable housing in Fairfield. Do we have the site map, the aerial? And do you have the sheets of those, Jimmy, that you used? What Mr. Zillow has put on the board, because we're going to give you, could you hand those out?
If you would just give them to the last person, then we'll pass them.
And the point I want to make is that the neighborhood in question here, as these are passed down, are particularly well suited to this type of housing. You'll see. I want to just say one thing, and I don't mean.
Excuse me. Excuse me. In these hearings, we don't have any kibitzing on the side. Please, no laughing, no comments. You'll have your opportunity to speak later.
Yeah. I would just want to echo and say respectfully, I've been doing this for 40 years in this town and many towns. And one thing that I've always found in Fairfield, we may disagree, but we have the integrity to have our discourse with respect. And I certainly respect all of you and your opinion, and I hope you'll respect this process. As I was saying, you'll note on this map where the subject property is located. And you'll also note that there are a number of other multifamily developments in extreme close proximity. You'll see Evergreen Park, Trefoil Court, Pine Tree Apartments, and the Bloomfield Commons, and the Campfield Townhouses. And that is mentioned only because I think that it is important that when you cite multifamily houses, houses of affordability, and many of these are Bloomfield and Campfield most certainly, it's important that they not be isolated. It's important that they be part of a neighborhood. And this neighborhood has proven to be a good neighborhood, a responsive neighborhood for this type of development and for the families who look for an opportunity to reside there in the town of Fairfield. You'll hear as part of our presentation from our architect, Mark Andre. I won't steal his thunder. His presentation, however, will be brief. But basically, these are 3-story wood frame construction buildings. There's 29 parking spaces provided on site. As you'll hear in the course of our presentation, in order to enhance the sight lines relevant to the driveway, we are asking for the elimination of 5 on-street parking spaces. However, to mitigate this on-street parking loss, the applicant agrees, and for purposes of this record, stipulates to a condition of approval to grant a perpetual easement to the town of 5 public parking spaces on our property close to the road to be properly signed so that it will be clear that these are available for public parking for residents. And we do that in order to provide and mitigate for the 5 spaces, although we don't feel, based upon the observations that Mr. Galante has done, that there is an on-street parking stressing in the neighborhood now. What does that mean? Well, if you eliminate these 5 spaces from the 29, that leaves you with 24 spaces. And based upon 20 units, that leaves you a ratio of 1.2 parking spaces per unit. That is consistent with the parking ratio that's been approved by this commission with regard to the Black Rock Turnpike Moritz Place development, affordable housing development, the 1675 Post Road affordable housing development, and the Bloomfield Drive affordable housing development. It's also been judicially noticed in decisions that a parking unit ratio of 1 space per unit is considered to be consistent with public health and safety, and we exceed that at
Where's
1.2.
What is that based on, judicial notice? Where, I assume you got that from a case?
There have been cases, not the least of which was the Garden Homes case in Fairfield, where there was an issue that was raised in terms of the adequacy of parking, and the court found the ratio there, which I believe was 1.2, to be sufficient. And that case went up to the appellate court, was decided in August of this year, and the Supreme Court denied cert about a month ago.
So the number of parking spaces is based on the number of units or the number of beds or bedrooms?
Number of units. In this case, there's 18 one-bedroom and 2 studios. But your own regulations prescribe parking requirements based upon the number of units and not bedrooms. And indeed, in your Transportation Commerce Drive area regulations, you prescribe a parking requirement of 1 space per unit for multifamily use there.
That's in the transit area, is it not?
It is, and I don't mean to say that it's the same, but I'm just saying that you do prescribe by unit and not bedroom.
Okay.
The entire building will be equipped with an NFPA 13 automatic sprinkler system at the request of the fire marshal. I want to point out with appreciation that the fire chief and the fire marshal have worked very closely and constructively with us, both with regard to the prior application and with regard to this reduced application, and to ensure compliance. I want to hand in a couple of documents with regard to that.
Please give them to Dolores.
This that I'm passing down is an email from Chief McCarthy to me. This was after he had reviewed the prior 27-unit application. And what it says is, John, I've reviewed the site plan for the Beacon View Drive project and approved the turnaround as detailed in the plan. Thank you for the second look at this plan as we transition from Fire Marshal Kessler to Fire Marshal Higgins. Obviously, we've showed the department this plan, but as you can self-evidently see, by reducing the number of units by 25% more or less, we've further enhanced operational access with regard to that. The second document that I'm going to hand out, 2 documents actually, is a letter to me dated today from Joseph Versteeg, who's a code compliance and fire safety consultant. I'm also going to hand out Mr. Versteeg's resume. I won't read his whole resume, but I would call your attention to the fact that he has, in fact, been employed in the State Fire Marshal's office as the supervisor of fire code review in the State Fire Marshal's office. Again, I know you'll take time to read his resume, which is 3 pages, but Mr. Versteeg is, in fact, one of the most preeminent code compliance and fire safety consultants in the country. You'll see that from his resume, and his letter speaks for itself. I won't read it, but he has reviewed the plans, and he has found that the plans do comply with all aspects of the Connecticut State Building Code, the Connecticut State Fire Safety Code, and the Connecticut State Fire Prevention Code. And he's determined that there are, from the fire perspective, no considerations of regard to public safety. And as I think is important from a legal perspective, as I'll discuss in a minute, he has confirmed it is code compliant in all respects with regard to the applicable codes. As Mark will review with you, the bedrooms, the one-bedroom units are going to range from 637 to 799 square feet, and the studio units will be approximately 511 square feet. Now, we have had a code enforcement meeting with regard to this proposal. You have those minutes as part of your record. That meeting was held on September 7th, 2019. All the comments and recommendations of the code review have been addressed and complied with. And building construction, as I said, and Mr. Versteeg has confirmed, will comply with or exceed all requirements of the state building and fire code. You did receive, through Mr. Wendt, an email from Laura Pooley. She addressed 7 items in that email. 6 of them were confirmatory that our plans were responsive and consistent with her comments. She did raise some questions based upon a review by the police department of the driveway sightline. Mr. Galanti is going to address that momentarily. For the record, I need to state, and I think the commission is aware of this, and I think the commission has done an admirable job addressing this over the last few years. But there still remains a demonstrated need for affordable housing in Fairfield. Notwithstanding your good efforts, which continue, there is only 2.6 of our housing units are presently affordable. That's the lowest percentage of 22 block grant entitlement communities. And obviously, 8-30G prescribes a quotient of 10%. So we still have some way to go. The commission has previously, on numerous occasions, found that the need for affordable housing under 8-30G needs to be addressed, and they've often been courageous in doing that, and I compliment you for that. They've previously found that this neighborhood, as I indicated before, is an excellent location for such multifamily housing, and has approved numerous 8-30G proposals in the neighborhood. As I said before, what these projects and this particular development will do is to provide a significant housing need, not only for the affordable units, but for the market rate units, for people in the community, be they over the age of 50, empty nesters who want to reduce change their living habits but still stay in Fairfield, and as I said, younger people who want to stay in Fairfield, and inclusive of that are certainly town employees. The last thing I would want to cover before I introduce our consultants for a brief presentation of our project is the implications of this application since it is made pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 8-3. This is not meant to lecture to the commission, because most, if not all of you, are well familiar with the provisions of 8-30G and have dealt with it before. But I think it's important that the points be stated for the record. And I also think it's important, as Chairman Wagner has sometimes pointed out in these hearings, that it's important that the record comments be made so members of the public understand the parameters in which you're statutorily reviewing this application. Under 8-30G, and I quote, "Upon an appeal taken from the denial of an 8-30G application, the burden shall be on the commission to prove, based upon the sufficient evidence of the record, that the decision from which such appeal is taken and the reasons cited for such decision are supported by sufficient evidence in the record. The commission shall have the burden to prove, based upon the evidence in the record, that 1, the decision is necessary to protect substantial public interest in health, safety, and other matters which the commission may legally consider. 2, that such public interests clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing. And 3, such public interests cannot be protected by reasonable changes to the affordable housing development." Our Supreme Court has instructed that the court, in reviewing the record based upon that statutory provision, has to establish, and this is a quote from the Eureka 5 LLC versus Planning and Zoning case, 139 Con App 256, that there is more than a mere theoretical possibility of specific harm to the public if the application is granted. From Garden Homes, Milford, the record must establish that more than a mere possibility of harm to a substantial public interest is established. The record must contain evidence as to a quantifiable probability that a specific harm will result in the application if granted. Mere concerns alone do not amount to sufficient evidence to support the denial of an affordable housing application. A quantifiable probability of a specific harm, mere concerns alone are not sufficient. The Commission cannot deny an affordable housing application unless there is some quantifiable probability of harm, and reasonable changes cannot be made to the application to address such a quantifiable likelihood of harm. In one case, West Hartford Interfaith Coalition versus Town Council of the Town of West Hartford, 228 Con 498, it was held that possible problems due to the proposed density of the site do not outweigh the need for affordable housing under the statutory standard that is employed. The fact that the proposed housing is not consistent with the surrounding residential neighborhood is not a sufficient basis for denying an application. That's North Haven Opportunity for Affordable Housing versus North Haven Planning and Zoning Commission. In this case, I don't really think that's particularly relevant because, as I've said before, I think the neighborhood already has significant, positive, and I think aesthetically and property value contributing affordable housing developments within it.
Attorney Fallon,
Yes.
can just the site 228 Con 428, is that what you said? I just want to confirm the site. I don't remember the time. 228
Yeah.
Con 428?
Yes, I'll go back. 228 Con 498.
98, thank you.
West Hartford Interfaith Coalition versus Town Council of the Town of West Hartford. Similarly, in the Avalon Bay Communities case versus the Town Plan and Zoning Commission of the Town of Stratford, that's at 130 Con App 36. It was held that the denial of an affordable housing plan because of safety concerns regarding emergency vehicles, access for fire trucks, the adequacy of the public street for secondary emergency access, these were not reasons supported by sufficient evidence in the records and were outweighed by the need for affordable housing, finding that basically all of these were based upon theoretical considerations and possibilities. So the point is, and the reason for this law, which sounds very harsh if I'm sitting in your seat, and you've heard it before, is because the legislative intent when this statute was passed almost 30 years ago, and the manner in which it's been interpreted by the court was based upon the fact that it was considered public policy in this state to incentivize developers to increase the stock of affordable housing in the state by providing them a greater flexibility with regard to density, so basically the affordable housing components could be subsidized. That's basically what the statute requires. And I think it's clear, and I hope you'll agree at the conclusion of these proceedings, that there is no quantifiable probability of specific harm that would satisfy the rather strong burden that the Commission would have. And therefore, we hope, as you've done in the past, and sometimes, as I said, rather courageously, approve the application. And then what we find is when, after the acrimony that sometimes accompanies these applications, they're built, people say, hey, not so bad. It's a place for people to live. It's a place for people with kids to see their kids remain in their town. It's a place where people who want to keep their mother and or father around as they age can go. And they, in fact, have the impact, as new construction attractively done, to aesthetically impact the neighborhood in a positive way. Although that's really irrelevant in the context of the standards of 8-30G. So I think what I'd like to do at this point, before a few summary comments, and then turning it over to the public, we have three presenters tonight. Mr. James Zumo will take you through briefly, just to orient you to our site plan. Obviously, we've received already WPCA approval with regard to the sewer connection that is required here. I'm then going to ask Mr. Mark Andre, who's our architect, to review with you the basic architectural design. And then I'll call on Mr. Mike Galante of Frederick B. Clark and Associates to give you a brief overview of his traffic analysis, which has been filed some time ago, and also address the questions that were raised by Ms. Pooley in her most recent email of January 17th with regard to the sightline analysis. So, Mr. Zumo.
Good evening, Commissioner, Board. My name is James Zumo. I represent Land Surveying Services here in Fairfield over at 135 Fairchild Avenue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the site. You guys have the full sheet. It's got 6 sheets in there. I'm going to break down the 3 main sheets, the existing conditions, the proposed conditions, and the engineering aspect of the entire project. The first sheet we're going to go over is the existing conditions of the site. Currently, there is approximately 5 structures on the 2 properties at 15 and 21 Beacon View. The 2 sheds and a main structure on 15, the main structure and a shed plus an above-ground pool on 21. The site itself is, with the 2 sites combined, is about 21,848 square feet. Roughly just under, it's just over a half an acre, just at that area. It's a gently sloping site. It slopes from the east to the west, with about a 4-foot difference in elevation from one side to the next. The next sheet is the proposed conditions of the site. I'll let everybody flip to. The new building that will be constructed is approximately 5,700 square feet, with the footprint of the building is 5,700 square feet, with all the accessory parking and other structures like the generator and the electrical transformer. The building's going to be tucked up against the east side of the property, with the closest point being 6.8 feet away from the property line, with significant buffers that will be placed around the edge with fencing, grasses, and shrubs.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you're not showing any structures on the property to the left. Does that mean that there's nothing that close?
There's nothing that close.
How far is the next structure?
I can't give you an accurate number right now, but when we do our surveys, we generally go within 10 feet, depending on the scale, about 10 feet to the sides, and there's no structure within 10 feet of that property line.
There is a house, I'm just going to say to the left.
There is a house to the left and there is a house to the right, but they're not within 10 feet of the property line.
Are they centered in the lot as best as you know?
I don't know. We did not do the survey on the site, so I don't know exactly how they're situated on the lot, but I can only assume they're similarly placed as to what's currently out there on most of the lots.
One of the things that concerns me is that when we have this kind of site plan, we don't see the buildings that are near the properties. And that's important. I mean, when we look at this, we can see there's another building that's quite close to the property line. It's not on your map.
Yeah, the GIS doesn't accurately display property lines compared to a Class A2 survey. So the A2 survey accurately shows what those property lines are bearing and distance-wise. When we do our survey work, we go out there and we locate the immediate buildings as well as what's on our site. And if they're within a certain threshold, we'll show them on the survey.
I just suggest that the threshold should be what you're showing.
The problem for that is that you can't really accurately do that on an A2.
Microphone, please.
You can't really accurately do that on an A2 survey basis unless, unless you're actually going to survey the other property. And you can't go on other people's property to survey their property as part of a,
For example, we can see it on here.
That's right. You can, and that's probably the best tool you have. But he can't, in an A2 survey, go on the adjacent property and start really doing a survey.
Because the concern by looking at it is you've tucked it up right against somebody else's property line. 3 stories?
Approximately, yes.
4 stories.
Well, how tall is it? Excuse me.
No, sorry.
Excuse me. We were
You'll
gonna.
get a chance. You'll get a chance.
That's fine.
How tall is it?
It's going to be, actually, for this zone, the building is underneath what the allowed height is
How tall
for
is
the
it?
zone. The building height's going to be 37.4 feet high.
I'm sorry, we just can't run the hearing this way. You'll get a chance. In these hearings, we let each side get their say one at a time. Can't have you interfering.
The allowed height in the zone, if we're going to go off that, is 40 feet. So a structure could be built 40 feet tall in this zone.
Does the peak, I mean, you're saying.
It's to the midpoint.
To the midpoint
It's of the midpoint of the roof.
and that's what we.
Yes, that's how we calculate height in the town.
Is there a reason why it was tucked up in the corner there? Could it not been centrally located somehow?
It's tucked on that side due to parking. We needed to get parking on one side of the site so that we could get people in and around the site, especially for, sightline purposes. We had to get the sightline, so the best entrance and exit is on the western side of the property. So we tucked the building up on the eastern side so we could get parking up and around and through.
You couldn't move it over a little bit and have a one-way wrap around all the way?
The site isn't conducive to that because then you're going to be working with sight lines that, we might be running into separate sightline issues. This way we get the sightline that's required based off of our traffic study, and we have the building and all the parking and the maneuverability on the site that we need.
This is totally on 15, 17 Beacon View.
It's on 15, 17, and 21 Beacon View. It's on both sites. The entire project will be on both sites.
What happened to 19?
They're all incorporated into one. This one's a duplex. This one's a single family.
It's only 2 lots.
It's only 2 lots.
3 addresses.
I have a
All
question.
right? Yep. Okay. Yep.
These plans here, are they still accurate? Because they're dated January 24th, 19. When was the revision done?
What plans?
Like all these color pictures of the buildings? and
Gotcha.
stuff?
So that's the architectural plan. Mark Andre will be up after me to address all the architectural plans.
Does this have the height? Because this shows 4 levels times 10 feet, which would be 40 feet tall. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Where's the height written down of these buildings?
So it's
Is it
on the
on this
site
thing
plan.
also,
It's
though?
calculated based off of the average grade that we calculate. And then when we do that, we take his information and we take the midpoint of the average from the peak to the gutter. We take the midpoint, and then that's the height that you measure to the average grade. That height from the midpoint of the roof down to the average grade is 37.4.
But it's not from the top of the roof, right? So
No.
if you're looking at it, it's going to look taller perhaps, right?
It may look taller, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The important point for the record is, point for the record, I think, is although this is an 8-30G application, so that the zoning regulations don't apply, in this particular case, the structure would comply with the promulgated height requirements for that zone.
I was just speaking in terms of a person looking at it as opposed to like looking
Yeah.
at it.
No, absolutely. I understand. All right, so most of those questions address what I'd be talking about, so now I'll jump over to the landscaped aspect of it. The site is going to be significantly landscaped. The tree warden in our code compliance meeting, he requested street trees. We'll have 4 flowering street trees along the edge of Beacon View Drive, along with a brand-new sidewalk that's going to be grassed and landscaped. There'll be buffers around the building in the front on the east and the west-hand side with small grass and shrub, on ground level. The buffers on the east side of the building are going to buffer the transformer. The transformer will be located in the notch out of the building, as you can see on your plan, with arborvitae and other ground cover around that to kind of hide that from view. In the back of the...
Why is that on the street, transformer?
It's easy access for the UI company, for the utility company. They require a certain distance to be, I'm pretty sure they require a certain distance from the street so that they can access it. And this just allows them to be able to get onto their transformer quicker. We'll also have a generator in the southeast corner of the property that will be screened with landscape and also a fence. The back portion of the southerly portion of the driveway will all be lined with arborvitae. Those arborvitaes are going to provide a buffer to the rear, so that we want to provide some type of landscaping so that it looks nice, and that buffer will also shade the dumpster and the recycling area, so that's shaded from view from other buildings.
Is there a buffer on the east side, northeast side?
The east side of the building is going to have a fence, and then it's going to have just standard grass, ground cover, small shrubs.
We couldn't get some tall arborvitae in there for some extra screening?
It is possible. We do have to deal with the aspect of utilities. There's some other aspects that I could go over in the next part that I have to go over in the next part with the drainage that might limit the amount of arborvitae that can be put in there, but it's definitely an option.
All those little tiny boxes there, are those air conditioner units?
Those are air conditioning units, yes.
Doesn't that kind of affect your ability to plant things? I know outside my have a little tiny wall, window air conditioner, everything dies right outside of there.
Yeah, that's why most of the area over there is going to be grass. The air conditioning condensers usually, when we see a new construction, they're put on a gravel, type of bed, and they're situated on that for the reason what you're saying.
I forgot, are you the architect or the engineer?
I'm the surveyor and the engineer. Yeah.
So you weren't involved in planning it, you can't tell me why they put the air conditioners on, don't they go in each window or something?
Currently, they're there for the visual representation. Their final location, this is the probable final location, but they might alter from that. This doesn't have in-window units. This is all central air.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you won't have necessarily 20 different air conditioners in
Yeah.
central air?
Each unit is going to have their own separate central air conditioning unit. So just like in a standard house, if you have 2 air handlers, then you're going to have 2 condensers.
You do need 20 things then.
For each unit, you're going to need a condenser. Yeah.
Could you explain to me your note, the bottom left, where it says proposed fire hydrant location to be coordinated with local water provider and fire department?
Yeah, so we show a proposed location for the fire hydrant right now. That ultimately has to be decided between 1, Aquarian, and 2, the fire department of Fairfield. If they decide that they want to put that fire hydrant closer to the west side of the building, so be it. If they decide they want to put it on the building, they could do that as well. But that has to be coordinated at the time of construction with those two
Have there been any discussions to date about where that fire hydrant might actually go?
Not to my knowledge, no. We have not talked about that.
So I think you said this earlier, but just to remind me, there is a fence around the property?
Yes, there will be a fence around the property. Yep.
And what type of fence is that?
Standard stockade, 5 foot high, either vinyl, wood, or something, something to that similar nature. So fully slatted, screened.
It could be, all right, 5 or 6 feet?
5 foot.
Would you prefer to be 6?
And there, just to some other things on the landscaping. There's going to be 4 large maple and oak trees on the site, big trees that will provide shade cover for the parking lots over up in this area, so that, you know, we're shading them from the sun in the summer and stuff like that. The next sheet.
Another question on that sheet.
okay.
You have 22 arborvitaes, but your code says you're having 8.
Code?
Up here it says 5 and 3. And if these are 22, is that what you're having, 22?
It might vary. There might be more. Depending on how, you know, how extensive they want to buffer this, we could be adding arborvitae. We could, you know, at the minimum, what you're going to see here is where it's going to be landscaped with the arborvitae. The total number of trees that will be planted, that's going to be at the time of, you know, completion of the site work.
Well, your drawing shows 8.
Over here?
Yeah.
Well,
Your key up there, TP and TC, says 5 and 3.
yeah, that typo, it depends on what type of, you know, like I said, it depends on how much we want to, you know, screen this building.
You know, we depend on seeing what's going to happen.
Accuracy.
This is the absolute minimum of what will be out there.
Well, you've got 22 trees up there. I mean, you know how big they are, you know how far apart they have to be. I don't like hearing that you're showing 22, but there might be less.
Oh, no, this is the absolute minimum of what will be out there. There won't be any more, or any less. There won't be any less, I'm sorry.
Just to clarify, that's our landscaping plan as we are proposing. Even though landscaping in the context of an 8-30G, if it isn't a public health and safety issue, is not relevant, if the commission, in the spirit of the way you try to work with us and we try to work with you, wants to establish a condition of approval defining enhancement to that landscaping plan, I would stipulate for this record that this applicant will abide by that condition.
Thank you.
What's being stockpiled in the stockpile area?
That's just during construction. So during construction, you're inherently going to have, you know, soil being removed from one area, put into another area. So that stockpile location wants to be, we want to keep that in one area so that when that is ready to be removed, it's easy in and out.
Where's the snow going all winter?
The snow is going to be, that's going to be it's either going to be taken, it's either going to be pushed off-site or by whoever is the contractor who will remove the snow will be taken off-site. But there's no specific snow area on-site.
Well, what has been done in all the projects that you've seen, the other 8-30Gs where that question has come up, is clearly the space on these sites are somewhat limited between the parking and whatnot, so that the contractor has to provide for removal of the snow as well as its plowing, and that's worked out efficiently.
That's the next page. That's the next
Okay.
sheet.
I was thinking about snow melt and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the next sheet.
Where are these public parking spaces?
The public parking spaces are these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces immediately off of the road. They're the 5 closest spaces to the road.
29, 28, 27.
In one of something I read, I was skimming through it, it said that, I thought it said, that these 5 spaces are for the people across the road in number 36 because you're going to have to take away their ability to park for the sightline problem. Is that what that's about? And then if so, why aren't they dedicated to that person instead of like the public in general? I don't understand that.
Well, they're public parking spaces. You're right to the extent that we're proposing, as Mr. Galante will detail, the elimination of 5 on-street parking spaces. Those on-street parking spaces are not rightfully reserved by anybody. They're public parking spaces. Anybody can park there. A resident of anybody on the street, a visitor of anybody on the street, someone who's coming in to do work for somebody on the street. So all we're saying is, to mitigate those 5 parking spaces being eliminated on the street, we're going to dedicate under a perpetual easement to the satisfaction of the town attorney these 5 spaces as public parking. Now, who uses them, just like the current spaces, you know, we would not control. But
That's,
we,
yeah, that was one of the code, I don't know, code, some of the things I read.
Right.
Like there was a big question somebody had, how are you going to enforce that or not?
well, what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 things, and we've discussed that with Ms.
Oh, is that
Pooley.
one? Okay, yeah.
We're going to, first of all, ensure that where those public on-site, on-street spaces are being eliminated, there'll be signage letting people know that there's public parking available, and we'll come up with the correct language. And then we're going to properly sign these 5 spaces in a manner, again, consistent with the town engineering department, probably, you know, public parking or whatever they want us to say. So it'll be clearly identified as public parking, but there'll be clear identification in the street that those spaces are available.
So the people living there will have to have their car registered so that they wouldn't be able to park there?
Those,
So
you mean
it's for the
people who
public?
reside
Yeah.
that's correct. We would enforce that those spaces would be available to the public, although it's interesting because the people otherwise who live there could park on the street as well. But yes, we will provide policing of that, so those spaces are maintained for the public.
But just to be clear, the 5 parking spaces that are open to the public are open to the public, but the residents of this proposed site.
And their guests.
Excuse me.
Correct, but it would be our intention to manage those 5 spaces so that they will be available to the public. But yes, you're right, guests.
No, but to the public, but for the residents at this site.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And how many houses are these, this no parking area? How many houses is that in front of?
I'll let Mr. Galante, rather than, he's going to have a whole graphic for that, so we will address that, but I'd rather he do that.
So, I'm sorry. How many parking spots on site are dedicated to the residents?
24.
24, okay.
Yeah, there's 24 dedicated to the residents of the building, 5 to the public. All right. So the next sheet that I have is the drainage. This drainage has gone through this drainage study and design and implementation eventually, hopefully, will and is very extensive. We have gone through with the engineering department in the town of Fairfield multiple times to ensure that they were on board with everything. As you can see from the site, we have 2 separate drainage systems. We have a system, we have system 2 and we have system 1. The system that we'll be using here is called Retain It. Retain It is made here in Connecticut. It's a, they are concrete squares. They're 8 foot by 8 foot. In this case, this back one is going to be 3 feet tall underground. These ones are going to be 2 feet tall underground. They're different sizes. You can get them in a variety of sizes. The front system over here is going to be catching about 1/3 of the driveway and half of the house. And the rear system is going to be catching about half of the house, the building, half of the building and 2/3 of the driveway. Everything that's coming from the driveway out here will then be put into a storm scepter system, which will essentially remove all the sand and oil and garbage that inherently is going to happen during the winter with all the salt, and that will be cleaned periodically to make sure that that is running at, you know, top notch. And then from there, it'll dump back into the infiltration system, where it will then have a chance to infiltrate back into the ground. In the event of a storm where that overflows, these systems are now connected together at the same time. This system and this system are connected by a manhole on the eastern side of on the western side of the building. From that manhole, it then has a chance to go back into the town system. In Fairfield, you're allowed to overflow into the town system for stormwater, and that's what the purpose of that will be, so that no overflow will be held on site. The great thing with that is that, you know, no water is flowing off of the site. It'll all be contained, put underground, and then in the event of something large, the 6-inch storm that we got a couple springs ago, that water will then flow back into the town system and then through their pipes and all that.
There's all these little striped, checkered lines, that represents the direction of the water flow from?
That's all the piping.
Can you just show us again where the water comes from and where it goes to
So
for all those striped lines?
absolutely. So you're in the northern part of the property of the building, you're going to see you're going to see actually 3 lines coming off of the building.
That's on Beacon View.
That's on Beacon View. Yep.
That comes off the top of the building.
That comes off the top of the building. That's all the roof leaders. Those roof leaders are going to flow directly into the system.
And they'll go to that catch basin that goes to the town stormwater?
No, that's after. That's an overflow. So then you have the catch basin out here that's going to catch all of the water that's going to be flowing into the parking, as well as trench drains to stop any drainage from flowing off of the site onto the town's roads. And then all of that gets contained in the retainment system. Once it's in the retainment system, in the event of a large storm, it'll then overflow into the town system.
There's a striped line to the left that just goes nowhere, like it's separated, and then there's one that goes all the way around the top of the building, like on the opposite side of Beacon View, and goes, is that water, where's that water, why is it broken up? Like there's a break where the air conditioner units are, like one line goes way up, then it crosses over, then it ends down there, and then another one just starts where the air conditioners are and ends up on Beacon View.
Absolutely. On site right now, there is a drainage pipe that runs from a catch basin on the neighboring property to the east out to the manhole that's currently existing on Beacon View. What we're going to do is we're going to intercept that pipe. We're going to bring that back down and install a new manhole into that drainage line. So that's going to remove that pipe from crossing over our property from the neighboring property. We're going to then have a private easement over there for maintenance of that pipe, and then that's going to flow back exactly where it's going now, back into the town system.
And the other one that's really long, who's in charge of all the maintenance?
That's the owner. The owner will be in charge of all the maintenance of it. There's a maintenance manual in the back of our drainage report that outlines when to maintain it, how to maintain it, and all.
Does any of it infiltrate into the earth, or is it all?
All of it has a chance to infiltrate into the earth first.
As it goes through the pipes?
No, once it gets into the concrete galleys.
Okay.
These concrete galleys are big. They're about this tall, and they're hollow.
Okay.
They kind of just look like picture an end table, and then water going in there and then filtrating back into the ground. They're surrounded by stone and filter fabric, so that no silt and stuff can get in there to clog it up.
I'm worried about one of the other applications we heard. One of the engineers said that you could have if it backs up, you could end up with like a bathtub effect.
Not
seems
here.
Like there's a lot of impervious surface here.
Not here, because it's backing. In the event of an overflow, it then goes into the town system,
Okay.
which we are allowed to do in the town.
Yeah, if you look
That's
at
a lot of
Ms.
pipes.
Pooley's email to
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Wendt, if you look at Ms. Pooley's email to Mr. Wendt of January 17th, a lot of, she reviewed these plans, some of which, Commissioner, you're commenting on is addressed.
And then you'll see the sewer connection. That was approved for a 27-unit building back in
Is that this green line?
February 2018. And now this one, it's a smaller unit. It's going to be less gallons per day. So
Is there a drainage report that supports those plans?
yes, there is. That is in the engineering department.
It's not in the zoning department?
Yeah, we have.
Yes, so
Oh, okay,
the
so
zoning
we can get-
department. Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's been reviewed by engineering as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zumo.
Yep.
Mr. Mark Andre, who's the architect on the proposal.
It's not using any impervious pavers in this, no.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. My name is Mark Andre, for the record. My office is at 34 Sherman Street in Fairfield. I'm the architect for this project. I'm going to keep my comments very brief and be happy to answer any additional questions that you guys might have. Essentially, we have 3 levels of residential units, and we have ground level with the parking, the open parking garage. The building is basically organized with a central corridor in the middle that provide two means of egress. The main mean of egress in the front give you access to an elevator that's right off Beacon View, and then the second means of egress is off of this area from the surface parking. That also give you access to the parking spaces underneath the building. The exterior material that
Do we have those photos?
Those drawings.
that's part of your site plan, but
Oh, at the ends?
so this is the sidewalk, Beacon View, main entrance, elevator, staircase number 1, staircase number 2 give you access to the parking spaces in the front, give you also access to the parking spaces underneath the building. This is the ground level with the parking, the surface parking. It's not an underground parking garage, it's surface parking. 51% opening, that's qualified as an open parking garage. This is a typical floor plan. Center corridor give you access to one means of egress and another means of egress, with the main elevator providing handicap accessible access, or the resident can use it. Very straightforward. The entire building will be fully sprinklered. The exterior material that we are proposing, the reddish color is basically brick. This white area will be hardy boards, which is a more durable materials that require very little maintenance, maybe a paint job every so often. And the cap is basically the third level apartment, and I shape it in the form of a mansard roof to try to bring the scale of the building down. And the very cap of the building above the crown line, that's the flat area that's going to have an EPDM roof, which is not visible from ground level. I'm talking about this area here. These references are basically for building code, building height, floor-to-floor height, and floor joist spaces. That's the only reason they are really depicted in this floor plan.
Excuse me. Two of those photos, the color photos, I don't think we have.
These?
Right.
I think they are in your package.
At the end of the packet I have two photos. And I think the bottom one I have is the upper left, and the top one I have is the upper right.
You mean you have these two?
No.
No, oh, is it the two top ones? Yeah, two top ones.
You have this one and this one?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Two things, we can clearly make this board part of your record, but we're also happy through staff to get additional copies if you would like of the other two.
if you're using them, I would think so, but
Well, this is definitely part of your record.
thank you.
Is there some reason that the elevator isn't white clapboard?
I'm sorry?
Is there some reason the elevator is in white clapboard also? What kind of board did you say that is?
No, the elevator's got brick.
The elevator has a brick. That's the elevator shaft. A portion of it is project out of the building.
Why isn't it covered in the same white? It would look much less urban.
If that's something that the commission would like to see, we'll be happy to make a
You
modification.
also can put fake windows on it, so it would look,
That's also something we'll
much
take into a
more
strong consideration if that's something that you would like.
I'm still trying to clarify the date. The date of the set I have is dated January 24th. Is that the depiction of what the 24 or the 20 unit one looks like, or the 27 unit? I mean, what does this depict?
That's,
No, is this,
Excuse me.
was this Do you have a more updated one than what we have? I guess
This,
is what I'm
this
trying
rendering, this set of plan, that's for 20 units. We did two designs. The first design we did in the first code review was for 27 units. Subsequently, we changed that and we revised it down to 20 units. That's what is being represented
So
tonight.
what's the date on your set of plans? Because my set of plans says January of 2019, a year ago.
The last revision is this is, let's say, I can barely read this thing.
So that is the current set of plans that was done.
20 units.
Okay, so it had been revised before that, obviously.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Although the pictures I have is January 24th, 2018.
That's probably a typo on my part when I made those revisions. The rendering for the 27 units is completely different from these rendering.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't want to make any, I don't want to create any confusion. The first code review, it's a very different building. Has nothing to do with these rendering. So I apologize for the typo in the dates.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to. And then lastly, the building will be energy efficient. We're gonna use energy efficient windows, mechanicals, and things like that. And I'll be very happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. Thank you.
Lastly, Mike Galante of Frederick B. Clark and Associates. Obviously, he submitted a traffic report, which is part of your record. He'll briefly overview that with you. Also, in light of Laura's comment in her email of January 17th, comment number 7, he is also going to provide you with some additional information with regard to our calculation of the 85th percentile for purposes of sightline compliance, and also address respectfully some of the deficiencies that I think inadvertently are contained in the police department's review of that aspect of the matter.
Good evening, Mike Galante, Frederick Clark Associates, and tonight's the first time we're actually introducing a new name to our firm, which is Hardesty in Hanover, and the reason is we just simply merged with another firm. So over the next year, we're part of that firm a year already, but we've just introduced a new name, so don't confuse, it's the same firm, we're just changing the name. I tried to get a smaller name, but it didn't work out. Anyhow, what I'd like to do for the next few minutes really is just to summarize the traffic report that we prepared, and I'm sure most of you have the report. These graphics are from the report. There's nothing new in here except one chart, which I'll highlight. And then I'm going to go to the sightline issue from the town engineer's office and talk about how we reviewed that, and we respectfully disagree with how it was calculated and what the sightline really is as far as what was done, and I'll touch on that. And then we have a letter that we're submitting that describes that. And then I'm sure the town engineer will review it. Just for reference, and some of these graphics may actually help you with some of your earlier questions on where buildings are located, because these are blow-ups of aerials of the area, including the site itself. This figure 1 is simply the area of around the site itself. It happens to highlight all the other projects that Mr. Fallon noted before as far as affordable developments. The red dots show the 2 intersections we analyzed with traffic counts, analyses, accident data, and so on. And I'll touch on that in a few minutes. But I'm not going to go through great detail for each sheet, and there are a lot of sheets here. I'm just running through it. Figure 2, which of course is from the report, is just a blow-up of the area. It shows the site itself located on the southerly side of Beacon View Drive. We counted, analyzed Park Square Court, we analyzed Pine Tree Lane, and obviously along the side frontage. We did the traffic counts. We identified the peak hours. Typical commuter peak, 8 to 9 in the morning, 5 to 6 in the afternoon. These are weekday time periods. Volume-wise, along the site frontage, about 80 to 90 vehicles. I'm sorry, 70 to 80 vehicles, two-way along the site frontage. Those are 1-hour volumes, two directions. This simply, figure 3, this simply shows the traffic volumes. We have one for the afternoon, which we don't have, but it's in the report. This simply shows the volumes by turn of movement. These are the volumes we use as the analysis baseline, and we project it to a future design year, as you know. This just summarizes the volumes for different locations. It's table 1 in the traffic report. And I don't mean to go quickly, but you have it in front of you. I'm sure you've all looked at the report itself.
Excuse me,
Yes,
I'm having trouble hearing you, and I also don't know what you're referring to.
I'm
If you
referring
could
to
just
my
identify-
traffic report,
I know,
October
I have it
2019.
open. I need the page number so I could find it.
That's table 1. There's not a page number on it. It's table 1. And before that, I went through figures 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you.
Okay.
I found it.
Next step is table 2, which is the accident data we obtained from the Fairfield Police Department. We always go through a 3-year period. And this identified that there were no reported accidents on Beacon View Drive along the site frontage and at the intersection of Pine Tree Lane to the west, if you will, and at the Park Square intersection for the 3 years. This is just a summary. It happens to show a lot of zeros. It's not to be funny, but this is the breakdown of the data. If there were accidents, it would describe type of accident, location, time of day, roadway conditions, and so on. Table 3 from the traffic report is simply the summary or the identification of traffic volumes, identified site traffic. We proposed 20 units in what we call a low-rise or a mid-rise type of residential development, 3 floors. 20 units will generate 10 trips during the morning peak hour and 14 trips, that's a two-way volume, during the afternoon peak hour. Now, everyone will disagree with that, but these are based on facts, and the volumes and the rates are based on 45 traffic studies conducted at other facilities throughout the country, and it's from the ITE handbook. That is the document that the town uses and the state of Connecticut Department of Transportation uses, and that's what we use. I know there's been some discussion for other projects in town. This is the data we use. And those volumes were for a 1-hour period. So when someone has 2 cars in their home, not everyone leaves at the same time. So your wife, your husband, partner, whatever, may not leave at the same hour. It's going to be outside of that peak hour condition. This figure is figure 9 from the traffic report. It's simply the site traffic added to the roadway system based on distribution. And the proposal is to have a driveway, which I'll get into a little bit more in a minute. Entering movements are right turn in and left turn in. Those will be permitted. And we're proposing a right turn out only onto Beacon View Drive. And the reason for that is the sightline conditions on the curve in the road, and the best solution, if you will, is to have a right turn out only, and it's based on the sight lines, and that's really the basis of the comments from the town engineers. I guess item number 7 in her document, in which I'll certainly touch on in a minute. But we add this traffic on top of the baseline, what we call no build traffic volume for a future traffic condition, and we develop what's called build traffic volumes. And I don't have the figures here, but they're in the report itself. We have it for the 2 intersections, AM and PM, and of course in a build condition and a site traffic condition, we have the driveway itself. Next table is table 4. This is the abbreviated table, so you can kind of read it, but it summarizes the results. You know, we do levels of service, vehicle delay, and so on. It's based on a computer model that's followed by the town and by the state of Connecticut and everyone else in pretty much every state. And it measures the delay for the intersections. The intersections that we're studying in this study area are all stop sign control. I think one actually had a yield sign at one point. And we, of course, have a driveway that's stop sign control. And the levels of service are anywhere from A to F. A is things are very good, very little delay. F is, we used to call it failure. It's just simply more congestion. The results of the analysis are a level of service A in each case. The reason for that level of service measurement is these are all low volume roads, and we're only adding 10 to 14 vehicles during a peak hour on top of the current volume. So we have a before and after condition. We don't change levels of service because of the volumes. Next part is really I think for the moment, the most important part. The traffic study, of course, summarizes all the details of the traffic volumes on area roads, intersections, peak hours. We looked at accident data. We obviously spent a fair amount of time on sight lines. Quite a while ago, this project's been around for year and a half, maybe more. And the location of the driveway, as was mentioned before, was placed to maximize site distance. And that's why the driveway is placed on the frontage of the site to maximize that site distance. Second part of it is we recommended having an exit only, which is right turn, meaning we didn't want to have a left turn out, mainly because of the sight line looking to your right in this case. So what we propose is a right turn out only, which means you only need a sight line looking to your left as you're coming around the curve in the road. In this case, it's not really an issue to go around the block, if you will, to go someplace in the other direction, and that's why we felt comfortable doing that. They're all public streets, so you can do that. But what we did originally, I'll tell you what we did originally, and then I'll talk about the town engineer's comments, and I'll bring you through why we disagree with that respectfully, and we kind of draw conclusions in that. At the end of the process, we still do have the adequate site distances we need based on standards followed by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Police Department collected data. They put a plaque on the road, although I couldn't find the plaque where it was placed. You typically put it down with tape. I didn't see where the tape was, but we think we know what equipment they used. And what they did is they measured volume and speed for, I believe, 6 days. We actually tried out this equipment several years ago for the company when they first came out. And we tried them for quite a while. We compared it to other means of collecting data, such as traffic volume and speed. And to be honest, we stopped using them. They gave it to us, because I'm sure they gave it to lots of traffic engineering firms around the country to try them. And what we found was they weren't that accurate. We also found that in some cases, they were gone. Someone took them off the pavement. So what we did, and we used to use hoses across the road, and I believe this commission disagreed with my speed data on one of the other projects, and I wish I could remember the project, because it gives you false readings. And the reason why I say false readings is if you look at the police data, and it measures the speed, I'm just going to focus on speed for a moment, but it measures the speed of cars driving in both directions on Beacon View Drive. In this case, since we only have a right turn out, we only need the speed going from the left to the right in front of the site itself. We don't need to measure the speed across the street in the other direction, because you're not crossing that traffic. But that's okay, the data's there. We have data for both directions also. But the equipment that was reading the speed by the police department, they installed it. We haven't talked to them, but we're pretty sure we know which piece of equipment they used. It gives you false readings. It also gives you an error of about up to 4 miles per hour per vehicle when it measures the speed. We use a radar gun, which is very accurate and within 1 mile per hour or less for every vehicle. So we feel we have better data.
But what exactly, why are you saying that in this case that their equipment was faulty or that they were off?
Let me just
Okay.
give me another minute, and I'll just tell you why I'm making that statement.
Thank you.
It's not a statement I make that often, but I just, we're trying to respond to the question, and we're more than happy to speak to the town engineer, beyond tonight, and because obviously we'll be here doing other projects. And we've talked to the town engineer about how we do speed studies and look at site distances in the past in general, so we can all be on the same page as far as how it's done. If you look at the data from the police department, it gives you data of cars going over 40 miles per hour, over 50 miles per hour. And out of the data, we recorded I think about 96 vehicles in this one direction going at those speeds. If you drive on this road, I think you would agree with me, it's probably not possible, and I'm sure everyone here will disagree with me, that cars are doing over 50 miles per hour around that curve. It's just, I can...
Please.
I make the statement, I've done this a while, as you know, and we've actually went back out to drive it at those speeds, and it's an extremely uncomfortable speed to drive around that curve, extremely. So I find it hard to believe that those are the speeds that they're correct. The second part of the equation, as far as looking at the police data, is for whatever reason, it gives you the temperature of the pavement. And in many cases, overnight, it's giving you a pavement temperature of almost 500 degrees in January. I think that's highly unlikely that you have a pavement at that temperature at midnight in January. So just that alone is telling me that it's not recording the correct data. And I say that very carefully, and I appreciate what the police department does. and certainly what the town engineer does, but I'm concerned that the data is not accurate. We do it a little differently because we've been through this process before. And what we did is we spoke to Connecticut DOT, not on this project, but in the past, and we do radar. We actually go out with radar guns and measure the speed. And what the state tells us to do is go out during what they call off-peak conditions, 10 o'clock in the morning to maybe 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, not 8 o'clock in the morning and not 5 o'clock at night. And the reason is during what we call off-peak, when the volumes are lower, the speeds tend to be higher. If you're there 8 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock at night and there's more volume, the speeds tend to go down. So we go out at those time periods and we record the cars, every one with a radar gun. Yes.
Do we have the data from the police? Do you have
I'm
that?
giving it to you tonight, actually. You may not have, well, do you have it? If not, we're giving it to you. We're giving it to you.
Okay.
Okay, it's
kinda
attached.
hard, and I don't mean this against you, to just take your word on it when
Don't.
I need to see.
Absolutely.
myself. Okay.
That's perfectly fine. I certainly understand. Yes, ma'am.
I might be getting ahead of you, but I was just reading this. To get the sight line that you're saying you will get of 291,
Yep.
you're saying you only need 250 based on the speed you got with 26
Yeah,
miles
I'm going
an
to
hour.
get there.
Oh, you haven't gotten there yet?
No, no,
Okay,
no. I'm
cool.
trying to just talk to you about the data from the police and the evaluation by the town engineer and why we don't agree with those numbers. And I'll get to that in a minute or two. The other part was, and I forgot where it was, but I was talking about the temperature of the pavement. It's just surprising that this is showing up at almost 500 degrees in the middle of the night. And I'm not sure what the purpose is of measuring the temperature, but if that's not right, we're not so sure the speed is correct. What I call the false readings of over 40 and over 50 miles per hour on that section of road, I find it's just hard to believe. I had a project here in town, and I wish I could remember which project it was, where we did it with a hose across the road, actually 2 hoses, because you need 2 hoses to measure speed. And the data was showing high speeds. And this commission, maybe not the same group of people, disagreed with me and said, Michael, it can't be. And throughout the process and the speed, and eventually, obviously, the sight distance. So we've had this discussion before, different project, and I really don't remember which one it was, but just want to say we've been spending a lot of time on this. We're trying to make sure we have the right data and data we feel comfortable with. We've talked to DOT years ago about how we should do it, and that's why we're using the radar gun. And they want you to use a sample of 20 vehicles in each direction and base your 85th percentile speed on that information.
Mr. Galante,
Yes.
are there studies that have been published about the accuracy of this type of machinery and equipment? And is there anything that supports the view that these, when there are errors with this equipment, that it fails high and it reads a higher speed rather than reading higher speeds and lower speeds? In other words, a plus-minus error.
It could be a plus minus, yes, you can.
Versus always reading higher than what you might consider the actual.
Yeah, if you look at the summary data that we're submitting tonight, so that's from the police department, and it shows you all the speeds, then it starts showing you speeds that are higher and higher and higher sporadically, and typically overnight, when the temperature of the pavement's hotter, that speed is hard to believe.
I guess my question is, are there other studies, scientific
I'm
data
sorry,
that we could look at that would say, there's certain types of equipment that fail high?
The documentation for the police department's equipment and what we use is attached to the letter I'm giving you tonight. And that's where we get the range of 4 miles per hour per vehicle in either way. It is either way, I believe. And the radar gun at 1 mile per hour. So they're actually telling you in their information that's not 100% right. It's slightly off.
But
Okay?
But the manual.
Their manual, their book.
The police equipment
Oh, no,
manual is not saying that it's always +4.
No, but the reason why I'm saying and it's hard to say if it's lower, if it's in the 20 mile per hour range or 34 mile per hour, it's hard to say that's right or wrong. But when you start seeing the higher speeds, that's what tends to come out and hit you. And we've had this in other cases, not just here on Beacon View Drive. Okay?
So, Mr. Galante?
Yes.
I'm a little concerned that we're getting the analysis of what the police department did from you rather than from the police department.
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy for you to be very critical of them with no
I'm
one
trying not to be critical. I'm trying to just explain what we read from the data they
So
provided
one of
us.
the other, and I know you're going through this slowly, but one of the other things in this summary that we have, it says that your study was done in an hour. Is that correct?
An hour or two, yes.
And whereas theirs was done over 6 days?
6 days, yes. No one does that anymore.
Well, but they did.
I'm not here to answer what they did. I'm just trying to summarize what we read into it. And you can agree or disagree.
So you did it from 1 to 2 in the afternoon?
Yes.
If that covers your peak periods?
No. The speed is in non or off-peak periods. It's purposely not done at 8 o'clock in the morning, which would be your peak time in the morning, or 5 o'clock at night. We're specifically told by CONDOT to do it off-peak time periods, and that's what we do all the time. Okay, if they told us to go out at 8 o'clock in the morning, we would be out there at 8 o'clock in the morning.
So sorry, I have a question for staff. So do we have the police department report?
I'm going to hand you this in a little bit. It has their
We're
breakdown.
getting the police department from you?
It's what we got from planning, from the town engineer's office, which had an attachment to it, which was the police speed data.
And they submitted it to you rather than to us?
They submitted it to the town planning. And we're just responding to it.
Well, but we
Okay.
haven't seen it.
Can we have it now, please?
Do you have,
Yeah. John, yeah, of course.
Because
no, he's got data.
I believe Chairman Wagner would be
Yeah,
not pleased
happy about this.
at this point.
Do you know what system they used?
I mean, I
No,
just,
do you know, definitely.
Well, you're giving a response to
This
something we don't
was
have.
promulgated on January 17th in an email from Laura Pooley to Jim Wendt.
Right.
So this is nothing we've been sitting on. We didn't even become aware of this. I think Jim sent me the email the next day, or he's very efficient. So
okay, that's fine,
Mr. Wagner should understand, and I'm sure he'll be watching this record, I'm not dumping something on you. This is something, I'm not saying it was dumped on us, but this was something that was given to us not 10 days ago.
okay.
And one of the reasons why you don't have it sooner is I was away last week. So just,
No, that's
we
fine.
would have certainly submitted it
It
sooner.
strikes me as important data.
Yeah,
I bring it
of
up
course.
because I'm
Well, I
sure.
mean, what strikes me that you're presenting both sides of the picture here. You're not exactly impartial.
But so for the record, you definitely don't know what system they used?
No, I have it. It's in the first paragraph. Based on the coding in the summary of their speed data that's attached to this, it's like a spreadsheet type of attachment.
I see it.
It's called Blue Star Traffic Analyzer. And then I've attached that information from that company.
Mr. Galante?
Yes.
You said that the way you had calculated speed was something that it was based on a standard. The 1
Yes.
hour.
Yes.
What is that standard? Is it published? Is it something you can point to?
I can probably get something from Connecticut DOT, but we're told to get 20 samples during an off-peak period on a road.
DOT, though?
Connecticut DOT, yeah. And then the other part of, looking at sight lines, or in this case, really intersection sight distance, is the town engineer looked at standards that are national for sight distances, and I'm surprised Ms. Pooley didn't remember, but there are Connecticut DOT standards for intersection sight distance, and it's based on speed, okay?
Did you compare your analysis to the same time frame as the police?
Time frame, no.
Could it be that they may have the same reading as your report for that time
If I just
frame?
looked at their data, it's very possible, yeah. If you don't mind, let me just go a little bit more, and then as you know, I'm more than happy to answer questions. No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
That's okay. So just to kind of summarize the letter and the information that was provided, we originally said, the posted speed limit, by the way, is 25 miles per hour on this road. We measured an 85th percentile speed of 26 miles per hour. What that means, when you say 85th percentile, if you have 100 vehicles 85% of those vehicles are driving at 26 miles per hour or less. So there are, there's around 15% of that traffic driving over 26 miles per hour.
Well, that catches my attention though, as far as the
The way
sampling
the way we
size
measure
and-
intersection site distance is on the 85th percentile speed. It's not something I've decided on.
No,
This
I
is a standard.
understand that, but
Yeah.
I mean, even if I just went off the high figures, your analysis came out at 85%, 26,
26. Yeah.
and the police came off at 35
Almost 35. Yes.
in a 25-mile-an-hour zone.
Yes.
I mean, theirs seems a little high, yours seems low.
Yeah. Let me.
I would like to say that 25 is what we always do. But
Well, I don't want to sit here and say, enforcement. I mean, that's not a fair answer by any means. But when you look at intersection site distance, you don't look at the posted speed limit.
well, I mean, listen, it always deals on the Stratfield Road is 25 miles an hour, and that doesn't, strike you initially as a residential 25-mile-an-hour road.
Correct.
So it always goes by road. I grant you that, but
Yeah, you measure the speed on that particular road. That's why we went out with a radar gun to measure the speed, not just the posted speed limit. Let me just.
I'm sorry, one more time. When was the time frame that you went out in?
I believe it was 1 to 2 o'clock on a weekday.
Please.
Just gets tiresome.
Is there a reason why, is this thing turned on? Okay. Is there a reason why you took 18 samples on the eastbound and 19 samples on the westbound? Would it have made a difference if you did more on each of them at a different time of day?
It could be something different. I'm not going to say it cannot be. We took a sample.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just, if you don't mind, let me just go a little bit more to show you where I'm going with the whole comparison. So if you look at the town engineer's speed analysis and intersection site distance analysis using a round number of 35 miles per hour, that translates into a site distance of 335 feet. If you take out those high speeds and you calculate it based on the Connecticut DOT standards, it says you need, using the same 35 miles per hour, 317 feet. So it's going down. If you take, the next step, if you take out the high speeds, it comes out to 31.5 miles per hour. That's 301 feet of sight distance. Keep in mind, we originally said we need 291 feet of sight distance for 26 miles per hour. And I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers. I don't mean to do that. But what the bottom line of this analysis is that we can provide 301 feet of intersection site distance. That's the car coming out of a driveway looking to the left because there's a right turn. We can provide that site distance. So through this entire process, we still believe we still can provide the site distance that's needed at this driveway. And if I may, and someone asked the question before, how many houses was the parking restriction in front of? Did you ask? It's actually one house that's pie-shaped. And there's a driveway, in the middle of where we're taking the parking spaces off. And here's the site, it's right here. That would be signed no parking, for example. And then the other signing on site, as mentioned, would be to identify the spaces available to the residents that are not living at the site. Yes, sir?
Yes, with respect to the removal of the parking spaces,
On
is that
street.
something before the police commission?
We would have to typically go before the police commission.
And so that would be a separate application, and would that be an appropriate condition in order to establish those sight lines?
John, you want to answer that as far as the process?
Yeah.
As far as getting approval?
As far as getting approval for removal of the parking spaces, that's something before the police
Gotta
commission.
go to the police commission.
And in order to achieve the sight lines that you feel is necessary, it's necessary to remove those parking spaces, correct? So would that be an appropriate condition even under an 830G?
Yeah, I mean, you could say one of two ways. If I was advising as a town attorney, I would say you probably shouldn't condition your decision on the decision of another agency, but I don't really care if you do, because that is essential in order for us to meet compliance with the site plan we're asking you to approve. So we approach the police commission at our risk.
And if I might add, removal of these five on-street parking spaces is a benefit to the general public with or without this project because of its location and the approaching intersection.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you just speak into the mic a little bit more? Thanks.
I'm trying. What I was saying is removal of the 5 parking spaces on this curve on Beacon View Drive on the approach to the Pine Tree intersection, in my opinion, is a benefit to not just the residents exiting this site if this project was to be approved, but to the general public driving on the street because of the curvature of the road and the approaching intersection.
So in order to make it safe, those spaces need to be removed.
There's a benefit by doing that. There's a benefit, yes. We're asking it to be removed for the sight line coming out of the site itself, our site. Yeah. So and I know I threw a lot of numbers out in the letter. I tried to describe it as best I could, and I'm not speaking for the police department. They may agree or disagree, but this is our assessment of the information that we received that I guess I saw on Saturday. So that's why you're getting a letter tonight. That's partly my fault. I wasn't here to respond to it.
So can I, now I'll ask my question that I was going to ask before. So you did your study in 2017, December 8th, 2017?
Yes,
Is that too long ago to be valid, or is that still valid?
it's still valid.
And that was 1 hour between 1 to 2, and your study showed 26 miles per hour. You did
The
18,
85th percentile was 26 miles per hour, yes.
the average.
No, it's not average. The 85th percentile is
Oh, I'm
not
sorry.
average. It's a different calculation. We actually provide the average in our table that's in the
Okay.
report, but you don't use that to determine intersection site
Okay.
distance.
And
Okay?
you did 18 going eastbound, 19 going westbound, and
Yes.
then in order to get the 250 or 291 sight line distance, you have to do 2 things. You have to eliminate 5 parking spaces in front of number 36, which is kind of like down the road
It's
across.
across the street. Down the road across the street, yes.
And the second thing is you have to take some shrubbery away from the Zaharis property. Which unit is that?
It's this property right here.
What-
That shrubbery is in the town right of way.
Okay,
That's why-
I'm sorry, what property address is that?
I don't know. It's the same property. I think you said 30, it must be 30.
No, I said 36 about the 5 parking spaces.
In front of the same house. Same house.
Oh, it's the same house?
Yes.
Okay. And then the Fairfield Police Department did a study from 1/2/19 or 1/2/20 to 1/7/19 or
Approximately,
1/7/20.
yes.
I don't know if it was a year ago or a day ago, but
I'm guessing it was recently.
they came up with almost 35 miles an hour, which would require 335
Correct.
sightline,
Correct.
which you can't get to by doing those modifications you were
No.
talking about. Okay,
No.
thanks.
Anything else? I'm here, so I can come back up later. Thank you.
I'll be brief because I know there's a lot of people who want to speak. The one thing I did want to say, you received a letter from the Affordable Housing Committee. We appreciate they gave us the opportunity to review this. We're disappointed they're not supporting the application. I just would want to say a few things. I'm not going to read their letter. You have it. But I think, to the extent that one of their comments was that this proposed project is located within a compact residential neighborhood. Well, as I pointed out, this is a residential neighborhood that time and time again has been approved within very much walking distance for this type of an application, and it has worked well, and it will work well here. The other thing that is commented on, and I want to just take a moment to address it, is they have concerns relative to the lack of experience in developing and managing a residential development of this size, and Mr. Palick's ability to fulfill his obligations under the affordability plan. I just want to say a few words about Mr. Palick. It's unfortunate, in my judgment, that I think he's been exposed to really a lot of very unfair and unfortunate comments. They're not part of this record, and I don't intend to make them stuff, but, linking his opportunity here to his business in Southport, and albeit threats relative to how this can impact your business and so on. I'm not going to hand it in, I was going to, but there's been emails that have been very terrible, I think. But for purpose of this record, I think it's relevant to point out a few things, especially in light of the Affordable Housing Commission comments. Mr. Pollack came here as a merchant marine in 1986, landed in Bridgeport. He worked his way up through the restaurant business, and in 1988, he was able to open a restaurant with his brothers. He's worked since then 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. He's opened his own restaurant in Southport in 2004, and if you talk to anybody, he gives back as a businessman to the community. He's got 4 children. They live on Pine Tree Lane. They live in this neighborhood. That's where the kids have been born. That's where he still resides. He spent a great deal of his time buying and refurbishing fairly derelict homes in this neighborhood. He's invested his time and money in this neighborhood, and he's also managed numerous properties with tenants who think very highly of him as a landlord. So he has significant experience in managing rental properties. He may very well choose to hire a manager, as many of these 8-30G representatives do. But clearly, I think it's unfair to somehow characterize him in a manner that he's been characterized because he's a gentleman who is committed to this town, he's committed to this neighborhood, and he has good experience with managing rental properties. So I want to give the public a chance to talk. I'll defer my final comments until
Can I ask one
final
question?
comments.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
ma'am.
On the application form, it says there's 29 parking spaces. That's not correct.
Well, there are 29 parking spaces on site.
Not for the unit owners, not
There
for
are-
the residents there.
Correct.
There's
There are
24
29
for the
spaces on
residents.
site. 5 of them we're going to dedicate to the public, so we have 24 for our residents, which is a ratio of 1.2, which is
Okay. I
typical.
just wanted to
Yes,
understand.
correct.
Attorney Fallon, you cited
Yes.
a North Haven case. Do you have the site for that?
I cited, could I do this so I don't hold up the public, Commissioner? Can I look at my notes?
Absolutely.
And then I'll get that to you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're ready for public comment. Just come forward if you're ready. Ma'am, please come ahead. Go ahead. Ma'am, you can go first. Please state your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Jay Braun.
You can pull the microphone to you.
Good evening. My name is Jay Braun. I live in 200 Lakeside Drive. Wait a minute. I'm getting worse. I can't stand it.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't get your name. What's your name? I'm sorry.
I'll start all over again.
I'm so sorry.
Good evening. My name is Jay Braun. I live at 200 Lakeside Drive. I am resident of 45 years. This is my home, and I'm very proud to be part of a Fairfield community. I'm here tonight temporarily to represent the owner of 13 Beacon View Drive, BV Property LLC, which is owned by my sister, Eunmi Park, and another sister, Eunhee Park, the owner of 11 Beacon View Drive, until an attorney can be engaged. If you don't know which is 13 Beacon View Drive, is the one unfortunate, unfair property right next to their, underneath their bedroom window has a 20 condensing air conditioning unit, and there is a commercial size generator right next to the property line. And probably the lowest spot in whole neighborhood is large drain. Anyhow, my sister works many long hours in local hospitals and do not have very good command of English language. So they asked me to speak for them. The notice of this hearing was only mailed to my sisters on January 15th and was received by them several days later. This is a very complicated case, and they have been already turned down by 2 attorneys whom experienced in zoning matters. BV Properties and Eunhee Kim hereby request the hearing to be held open for 30 days, please, so they can engage an attorney and have a time to conduct legal research on this matter. This is a matter of fairness to the property owners who will be affected the most. The owners deserve their legal right to fair representation before this board. Now the question, should I continue or will the board take up their request for the postponement of the open hearing? And I would like to know.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm going to object, and I would strongly suggest that the commission give some consideration. You have a statutory process whereby you engage applications. They are publicly noticed. People do receive notice of these applications, and applicants rely on that. I think the commission, in terms of your scheduling, relies on that. It's one thing if it's necessary to continue a hearing because you've exhausted the time that's available and there's more comments to be made or work to be done, but I really think that the commission respectfully should think long and hard about someone coming forward after something has been duly noticed in accordance with the statute, saying, well, you know, now we'd like to continue it for 30 days. It's going to get terribly backed up and be, I think, terribly unfair to the commission in your own time and also to the due process rights of the applicant.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fallon.
Let's ask Jim about proper notice.
I have a question for staff. Did we give proper notice?
Yes, I can. Yes.
I also have the copy of the letter that my.
Excuse me, just hold for a second. Were you going to say more, or?
No.
No, okay.
Take it under advisement, because you may want to leave it open for what we just got from Mr. Galante.
Right. Well, there may be other reasons why we keep the hearing open based on the information we received. All right. So please go ahead.
Tell her we'll take it under advisement.
So you will not accept the extension?
We'll take it under advisement. We'll consider it later.
Okay, again, the same as in my English is a little limited, so I'm going to introduce my husband, Thomas Braun.
Okay. Please, no applause, just
Right, I'm
quiet.
Thomas Braun, and I live, that was my wife, Jay Braun, and I live at Lakeside Drive, Fairfield.
I'm sorry, excuse me, but she had mentioned you live next door to the complex?
My sister-in-laws own the property. One sister-in-law owes, through an LLC, owes number 13, and the other one owns number 11. And they are the house in closest proximity to the building, and they
I
will be
understand.
most affected.
Okay.
Okay. So, they invested in the property in the expectation that the neighborhood was stable, safe, and residential, not like Stamford full of apartment buildings. This building is styled like an Empire Revival building, does not belong in that neighborhood. But it's an apartment building in a neighborhood of modest, affordable 1- and 2-family homes. Mark that word, this is an affordable neighborhood already. This property was chosen by developers for that very reason. This is one of the poorest areas of income in Fairfield, with the most affordable homes both to rent and purchase. This neighborhood was originally built by the federal government during World War II to house munitions workers working in Bridgeport. The homes were then sold to those workers after the war. It was affordable then, and it's affordable now. This neighborhood was originally designated as affordable housing and has been affordable for almost 80 years. Now luxury apartments are being wedged into an affordable neighborhood. Now, Mr. Fallon, there were long tears about how we're helping the poor and affordability. They're destroying 3 affordable units to create 6, along with shoehorning in another, what's the math, 16 market rate apartments in that very place. A net gain of 3 units at the cost of destroying one of our low-income neighborhoods with additional traffic and all that this project brings to it. This area has one of the most largest stock of affordable housing that we have in town. Now, by and large, the residents here do not have the financial wherewithal to combat this project. They are renters and homeowners that are just hanging on financially. They cannot afford the thousands of dollars required to fight this. The town of Fairfield, their elected representatives, should stand up for them to fight this. What is this, justice only for the rich? Can you imagine the turmoil and legal fight that would result if this project was proposed for Old Academy Road next to the church? They'd be up in arms and it would be turmoil for years. It would be tied up in court forever. It's really unfortunate that they choose to pick on a neighborhood of people that cannot fight back. The Section 88-30G regulations were certainly created with a noble intention and goals in mind, but it's being perverted in the name of profit and is hurting the very people it supposedly intends to help. Now, I have a list of specific objections. As my wife discussed earlier, the notice of hearing was mailed about 10 days before this. They received, well, maybe a little earlier, but they received it only 10 days ago. This is a very complex case, and they've discussed a number of attorneys, contacted a number of attorneys. Two of them that are experienced in this field have turned them down already because of time constraints. They need more time to get their representation and have their rights maintained. Now, specifically, the 20 air conditioning units that are shown on the plan, and these are 20 outside compressors that we all have outside our homes. They're very noisy. They are 20 feet from the bedroom windows of 13 Beacon View. 20 units. Now, I have one at my house and it's noisy. Can you imagine 20 units outside your bedroom window? The houses and yards of number 11 and number 13 would become unusable. These units, if they were actually heat pumps, which they may very well be, as it's not specified, they will run 12 months a year, 24 hours a day of a constant noise of a fan. Now, why weren't these units placed on the other side of the property where the parking lot is in the street? Why weren't they placed on the roof, which is a flat roof? It could have easily been hidden behind the mansard and nobody would see it. They could have put 2 large commercial units on the roof and had true central air conditioning, but this is more profitable, and that's the only reason they're doing it this way. Now, the neighbors will take it again in the neck in the name of more profit for the developer, instead of doing what's best and what's right. Now, this actually this lack of ability to enjoy their property represents a taking of their homeowner rights and their ability to coexistence and use of their property. Now, this building has been raised in height since it was last proposed. I believe this is due to the recognition of severe water problems in the area. Sunlight and fresh air is completely blocked by the wall facing number 13. Now, they talk about a 40-foot height, but you know that's a theoretical calculation. The actual height of the ridge, I suspect, is closer to 50 feet, although I can't really tell from the plans. In addition, the 20 air conditioning units will be discharging hot air right at the side of number 13, making it a very unbearable situation. There is a history of water problems in the area. The backyard of 11 and 13 was constructed with a swale to direct water away from the rear of the homes. The rear property of 11 and 13 rises at a very steep slope. There's a low area, and then it rises again to the back of the house. A yard drain, as shown on the map, was installed many years ago and is connected to the town storm sewer system. I can personally attest that I have seen knee-deep and waist-deep water in that backyard swale as the water overran even the yard drain that's there. I, in fact, used to live at number 11 for a while, and I have personal experience. The existing drainage pipe from number 13 is connected to the storm sewer system by way of a grandfathered 6-inch pipe in an easement. This easement is shown crossing the footprint, going under the foundation of the proposed building. I don't believe that, okay. Now, I don't believe the town currently allows surface runoff from residential development to be piped into the storm sewer, but must be retained on site. They're showing a new easement. Has the town permitted that? Will they permit that to happen? It's a new drainage connection. Now, the plans here show an easement running under an existing old easement running under the footprint of the building. I don't believe this is allowed by the building code. So the applicant shows a relocated drainage easement just inside the property line on the east border. Now, this is a material of misrepresentation of facts by the applicant. The applicant has not contacted the owner of 13 Beacon View about changing the location of the easement. The map just says there's an easement, a new one on the east border. There is no easement there. There has been no discussion with the property owner for an easement. As far as we're concerned, the easement still runs where it shows under the building. And no one has asked to come to us about it. And there are certain property rights which number 13 have which have been disregarded by the applicant. They say this is to be demolished. It's not to be demolished without somebody's permission. I'm sorry. They say that the number 13 is going to accept conveyance of an easement. They're not going to accept conveyance of an easement unless there's some discussion with the applicant. So it's a material misrepresentation of the facts, which will not permit this building to be placed where it is, as is. Okay, the homes in this area were originally built with common sewer and drain lines running through the rear yards. Some pipes are unmapped, some have changed over the years, and some have not been changed. There should be a complete analysis of the drainage and sewer connections in the area before any large projects are built. There are probably other yard drains and other drains that have been cut off by construction, drains that lead nowhere. Nobody really knows. If you dig in those backyards, there's full of all kinds of old drain lines that were put in the 40s. Apparently this development had sort of a private sewer system, which I believe was tied into the town at some later time. A lot of these lines are not even mapped. Now, in addition, on the east border, the developer shows that they're going to install a yard drain at a higher elevation than the yard drain in the back of 13. They're also raising the grade under the building. This is going to cause flooding to number 13. Whenever you raise a grade, the groundwater level rises. Number 13 and 11 are sitting in a hole with this drain at the bottom. So how can the new yard drain in the raised area be higher than the existing yard drain? It's going to cause a terrible flooding problem. Their maps show none of this. They totally ignore that number 13 is there and the contours of the land. Now, it's possible. Now, I was going to discuss the parking, but as we can see, they're taking away 5 off-street parking. The kind of people that live in this area are husband, wives, maybe some adult children. They all work because they're in relatively low-income jobs. There can be 3 or 4 cars per house. These are mostly duplex houses, so each lot could theoretically have 6, 7, 8 cars. There are no garages here. The houses absolutely depend on off-street parking. He says they're going to restrict 5 parking spaces. There's absolutely no way to prevent that. Unless they guarantee to provide a towing service, some kind of identification for tenants, the tenants are going to park there. 1.2 spaces is not enough. You've got 20 spaces, 20 apartments there. If only 6 or 7 people have 2 cars, all the parking is gone, in addition to the spaces supposedly for public use. That means that we're losing 5 spaces with no gain. There's no place for the off-street parking, which is absolutely required. Because these lots are so small, you have only 2 spaces each off-street. And unless you want people to park in their front lawns, there's not going to be a place to park. This is providing a severe hardship to the neighbors, and I don't see why the neighbors should have this hardship. There's discussion of the right turn to come out of the driveway. Taking a right turn will require maybe, I don't know, half, 3/4 of a mile loop if you're going over to Black Rock Turnpike. The left turn is a very short shortcut to go to Black Rock Turnpike. What do you think people are going to do? They're going to take the left. This restriction of right turn is only going to be a sign on private property saying right turn only. The police won't enforce it. There's no town ordinance that will prevent people from turning left. You may know Billy's Bakery. When you leave the side entrance, there's a little sign that says right turn only. If you go there, half the people turn left onto Black Rock Turnpike. There's no way to prevent this from happening. They can put all the signs up they want. People are going to take a left turn. Now, the rear property line on the east side shows a generator. Now, these commercial generators are huge. I have one outside my office building. There's a 3 or 4 foot oil tank, and there's a 6 or 8 foot generator sitting on top of it. What? Okay. The generator, in the rear of, the generator is actually huge. It doesn't show the size, it just says 4 feet from the side yard to front, rear and side. Now, I have a similar generator at my office building in Fairfield. There's a 3 or 4 foot tall oil tank. There's a 8 or 10 foot tall generator sitting on top of it. It's a structure that looks like a semi-trailer container, and it's sitting in the middle of a residential area. Every year there's endless complaints about merchants parking trailers for the holidays to store goods, and they're asking to put one permanently 4 feet from the property line of my sister-in-law's property and leaving it there forever. In addition, these generators are tested every week, and when they're tested, they run full blast for 15 to 30 minutes weekly. That's a terrible amount of noise. I haven't seen anything here about the noise and the decibel levels and whether it will violate the town health code, of which we do have as for decibels crossing the property line. Residents here, again, they're hard workers. They work at night on shift work. They sleep during the day. How are they going to sleep with a generator going full blast once a week, waking them up? Okay. In summary, there are many problems with this proposal, some technical, some aesthetic, some legal. The project was placed in a neighborhood of existing affordable homes and apartments. The residents here do not have the time or money to oppose this project to protect their health and safety. In similar projects, board members, and I don't know you or things I've read, said that we can't oppose it, it's state law. Of course, that's a specious argument. Of course you can oppose it. Vote it down. Let the developer go to court as is their right. You don't have to blindly do whatever because they might get overturned in court. There's nothing wrong with court. I urge the board and the town government to do their duty and to protect these citizens, many of whom really can't afford to spend the time and money to protect themselves. Thank you very much.
This here.
You need to introduce yourself.
My name is John Lamb. I'm the owner-broker of John Lamb Realty since 1993 here in Fairfield, and I'm the one who made the video about the Beacon View monstrosity.
And where do you live? Where do you live?
I live on Park Avenue, and I own John Lamb Realty in Fairfield. This picture that I'm showing here, the rendition that I made, shows the actual houses. This one,
Excuse me just a second.
that's number 13, and this one, 23.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Do we have any way of making this part of the record?
I'm happy to give it to you. I have a stick. Okay, let me know where to do it. I'll send them all to you. I've got 2 or 3 things on it that I'm going to show you tonight. This property here is the one right next to the development, like I said. And as you can see, it's about twice as big as the houses that are in the area. Let me just start by saying, I don't think anybody here has objections to affordable housing in Fairfield. If this project had no parking garage, the 2 words we haven't said tonight, parking garage, we wouldn't be here. The problem is, it's got this underground, above ground parking garage that's going to make the unit 50 feet. 3 stories above the parking garage. And, you know, if we cut this down to 9 units, we'd still have 3 affordable, and we would have a safer place. So tonight we're deciding if these scant 3 units are worth risking the public health, the public welfare, and public safety of everyone who uses that street and the adjacent streets. But first, let's talk about how we got here. How did we get here? Before the Beacon View monstrosity proposal, there was the Beacon View blunder. We know the applicant, Sammy Palick, the owner of Sammy Southport Pizza.
No.
I'm sorry, please.
Correct us.
That's
Okay.
to us.
He's never built a house. That's true, not once. And I know Mr. Fallon doesn't like it that when I call him a rookie amateur, but he is indeed a rookie amateur when it comes to building houses. So it's a fact. And what he did was he purchased the properties at 15, 17, and then he purchased the property at 21. Then the owner of 25 on the right side over here, decided she was going to sell. That was not a duplex, that was a single-family house attached to number 23. That's when Sam made the blunder. He decided to purchase number 25, thinking that 23 was part of it as a full duplex. It's only a half a duplex. So Paula Gallo owns 23. She's right over here. Sammy thought he was buying 23 and 25 at the same time. And by the time he figured out his mistake, he also bought 27 and 29 over here. $525,000 he spent on non-contiguous properties. But he didn't find out till 2 months later because he didn't bother to do any due diligence. None. Did not hire an appraiser. Did not do a title search. He didn't even bother to do the simplest thing like walk next door and talk to Paula and say, hey, I'm thinking of buying the place at 25. So he made the mistake.
Excuse me, sir.
I'm getting to it.
Well, no, I mean, this isn't about your opinion.
Understood.
Of what other people did.
Understood.
Please address the issue.
Understood. I'm getting to it. It's part of a pattern. So now he owns 15 to 21. He owns 25 to 29, but not 23. That's why we're here. He was going to put 20 all the way across, but instead, he only owns 2 properties, so he's going to go, let's put 20 on this small area. He cut the corners. He made the mistake, and now he wants us to pay for it. He made the mistake, not us. This shows he's an amateur that doesn't know what he's doing. He couldn't even do the land purchase properly.
Can you address the issue, please?
Okay. Now, let's be clear. This property threatens public health, welfare, and safety, and here's why. It's a giant, dense behemoth. Let me explain exactly how giant and how dense, because we've been talking about the property on High Street for a while. You guys are familiar with it, right? You're familiar with the proposal for High Street. That's 40 units on 2.5 acres. This one is 20 units on just a half an acre. Now, think about that for a second. If the developer at High Street proposed similar density, that would be 100 units. 100 units on High Street on 2.5. Or, let's do it the other way around. If the proposal here was the same size as High Street, it would only be 8 units. That's how much bigger and denser it is. And Mr. Fallon says it's like other ones that have been approved. He's wrong. There's never been one approved around here that has a parking garage, not the one on Pine Street, not the one on Pine Tree, not the one on Campfield, not the one on Beacon View, not the one on Moretz. You got it, exactly. None of those have a parking garage, only this one. And, you know, the parking garage, it's already a narrow street. I think we know this. The kids cut through from Black Rock Turnpike to get to the Fairfield High. And they speed, yeah, they sure do. You know, I believe the cops. I believe the cops study. I don't believe their study that they did in 1 hour and that the cops are wrong because he thinks that there's the heat sensor was wrong. You've got to be kidding me. The cops did a study over 7 days. He did it for an hour. It's unbelievable. Okay, now, I'm serious. Okay, the traffic is always backed up, not only here, but on Campfield Drive, going on to Knapp's Park every single day, going towards the high school. Nobody can turn. They don't even try. I was out canvassing the other day. Neighbors tell me they don't even try to make that left turn anymore because there's too much parking, or there's too many cars. So adding the 20 housing units, and of course, they're going to turn right to go right into that traffic mess every day. Now, we just heard from Laura Pewley, the senior civil engineer in town, and what she said was that their traffic study was conducted outside of the peak hours, number one. And it still shows that the sight lines and the driveways are completely unsafe on the eastbound direction. I read the letter today, and he says they say that's borderline unsafe the other way. Now, I know they object. They have to object, because otherwise, that's the end of their project. And that's, by the way, even after tearing out George's bushes. And George, do you want your bushes torn out? I mean, seriously, George doesn't want his bushes torn out. So their whole project is based on not only other people helping them out like George. And like I didn't even know about this thing that they're doing with Jade Parker. They were expecting an easement. I don't know what they're thinking on that side. But anyway, the The civil engineer of town says this required distance sightlines are inadequate. It says it right in her letter. And even after tearing out those bushes, and she says she's against it because it's unsafe. Affordable housing says they're against it because there's too many affordable housing places around. Among other things, Mr. Fallon says it's a great neighborhood for it. Well, there's an awful lot of them. Pine Tree, we named them all. They're everywhere. So adding 20 more cars would create a daily safety hazard for pedestrians, including students who are walking around at Fairfield High. I would like to show you a video of actual traffic from the street, if you guys don't mind. It's only 2 minutes. And I want you to get to the actual traffic part, which is going to be up in a second. But this is a video that I took myself during the peak hour at about 2:30 in the afternoon at the site, exactly the site where they plan to dump all the cars right onto Beacon View Drive. And so we'll get to it. It's coming up right here in the next minute. And by the way, this video is on YouTube. If you just punch in Beacon View monstrosity, this is the first one that comes up. Now,
Here comes the school bus.
Which street is that?
This is Beacon View.
Sorry, which street is that?
Beacon View?
Is that
Is
Beacon
that
View?
this is I'm standing right at the site of the driveway where the driveway hits the road right now, where I'm taking this.
Use the microphone.
Yeah, I'm standing right at the site where this is, and here are some of the buses that come by. This is where we're at. Now we're done with it. That's the end of the portion that has the traffic. But as you can see, I counted about 12 buses that came down in about 5 minutes. 35 miles an hour is what the cops said one direction, 25 the other direction, and they say the sightlines aren't right. And their only defense is, well, the cops are wrong. I don't think the cops are wrong. I don't think the cops are wrong. Now, also, the applicant has a history of not following our laws.
No, we're not going there.
You don't want to hear about this? Okay, fine. You don't want to hear that he didn't get any building permits or that he has a blighted property? Sure, fine. Okay, well, in that case, the water has to go somewhere. And as we saw on this proposal, there is standing water all over the property. I'm going to show you some. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you some pictures of the standing water that's actually on the property. The water table is really, really low in this area. And
Do you have this on a thumb drive?
yes, I do, as a matter of fact. And I can get, yeah, I do. Okay, I do have it. Anyway, this is what the backyard looks like on a regular basis. This here is number 21, where the applicant's going to. This is the property next to it. The water's going to go somewhere. And I know, I'm not an engineer, but my dad was, and he tells me that it's going to go to the lowest area. And the lowest area is Paula's yard. And all you have to do is walk over there and take a look. And just go over there to 23 and just stand there for a minute. And her property's going to be completely flooded if this goes through. So, and of course, there is the enclosed parking garage that creates safety concerns. There's no security for this parking garage. There are no enclosed parking garages in the town of Fairfield, and there's a reason in residential neighborhoods. They're not safe unless they're monitored 24/7. We can do affordable housing without a parking garage. We did it on Moritz. We did it on Bloomfield. We did it on Campfield. We don't need a garage. And all the neighbors want is something reasonable that looks like maybe the ones on Bloomfield, or maybe even the ones on High Street that nobody wants, because that would just be 8 units on this small half-acre property, not 20. So if you decide to cut this down to 9 units, that would be 3 instead of 6. The question is, are we going to risk the safety of everybody? Fairfield High students for 3 affordable housing? I don't think it's worth it.
Please.
I urge you to reject this and ask Sam to come back with a safe proposal that looks like the neighborhood and is not safe. And, you know, I have to tell you about this sightline thing. There's no way to fix it. This is not a fixable thing. You can't force George to take down his bushes, and even if you do, the civil engineer says it's still the sightline doesn't work, period, under any circumstances. No matter what he does, the truth is Beacon View can't afford one single more car. There shouldn't be anything here. He should just go put up his 2 single-family houses or whatever it is. You know, it just doesn't work. I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate it tonight, and I hope you do the right thing and reject the project.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paula Gallo, and I live at 23 Beacon View Drive, right next to the proposed Beacon View monstrosity.
Sorry, do you live to the left of it or the right of it?
I live, if you're facing the street, I live at 23, and so that's next to 21.
To the right, on the right, okay.
Yeah, it says
All right, I understand.
Jennifer Arasi, she owned that side, the names are wrong even on the map. I own this side. He bought this, he owns that.
So please use the microphone.
Pardon?
Just state.
Yes,
You know.
I'm used to that. When Mr. Palick purchased the attached half duplex, he also thought he was buying my property. He didn't conduct a title search or an appraisal, and he didn't figure out that I owned my own property until I told him long after the closing. Now to pay his investors back, he's trying to shove 20 units on half an acre because he does not own my property, nor did he bother to make me an offer. He owns 3 homes on either side of my home, and he says he's out of money. That said, now I have to share common areas of my home, my roof, my basement, and if there's a problem, Sam's not available. He wouldn't even give me his phone number for a year if there was an emergency. And I repeatedly requested it, and I had to walk to his house to talk to him. Mr. Palick is a terrible landlord. When we had a sewage problem in the basement due to the breakage of his sewer pipe on my side, we had an emergency with days of sewage in the basement. Toxic fumes coming into the duplex on both sides. I called a licensed plumber for the emergency. Sam wanted to try and fix it for himself and to avoid the payment before I insisted we hired a licensed plumber. It shows Sam wants to cut corners at all costs. He actually looked at the mess and proposed fixing it and cleaning it up in a few days, rather than right away when licensed plumbers were there on the scene. They all already had their waders on. The plumbers were there and ready to work on this filthy, disgusting job with sewage in the basement. And then he argued about the price to repair for the cleanup, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Eventually, he relented. His tenants leave garbage everywhere. It blows all around the neighborhood, and he does nothing about it. One tenant left garbage in front of their house for 2 months. He did nothing about that. One tenant broke their mailbox, and it sat bent over for at least 9 months without a mailbox. One tenant has a daughter whose leaking oil car drips on the newly paved street, and in my opinion, he's not a tidy landlord. He doesn't do any landscaping. I pay for and do landscaping on the entire front lawn for both sides. Right now, there are tall ornamental grasses breaking and flying all over the neighborhood, and I emailed him about them making a mess in winter unless they are cut back, but he never responded. Now these grasses are on everyone's lawn everywhere, and they're like big, tall. Jay Park at 1113 is unable to rent her own property because of 1517 is blighted. And Sam doesn't mow the lawn on that property in the back. And in case you think I won't be flooded for this project, I invite each one of you to come over to my house. I'll make some tea, and we can walk around my property, and you can see how wet it is in the backyard. And while you're at it, you can check out the Fairfield High School traffic at 2:30. It's really plain to see that this project is simply not safe for everyone in the neighborhood. And I hope you reject this project. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. I really, please no more applause. No, we have lots of comments. I'm just asking people not to applaud. You can come.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I live at Pine Tree, right before Carol Martin's office, and her office is right before the pathway, and on the other side of that pathway is one of Mr. Palak's houses. And I am one of the first people, and I actually told Paula about all the litter that was there, and it was disgusting, and it was blowing all over the place, okay? And litter is a big problem in my area because my living room faces those lovely wetlands, which is the neighborhood garbage receptacle, okay? And every now and again, if the garbage gets close to my apartment, I step over the corral fence and pick up the garbage because it's in front of my window, okay? And one of his tenants, the children, walk by the corral fence and throw their McDonald's cups and wrappers and everything into the lovely wetlands, which is in front of my living room window. Okay, so that's the litter stuff. Now I want to talk about the traffic. I don't know about all these surveys, but I have a dog. I walk at all different hours. I don't have set times where I walk my dog. And I want to tell you, so many times, drivers scream at me to get out of the street. Well, there's no sidewalks, okay? And how many times I've almost gotten run over because they're speeding. You know, okay, it's not 50 miles an hour, but 40 is enough. In a 25 area, 40 is enough. And it happens all the time. I'm not saying every minute of the day, but it happens enough. And I'm only one person saying that. I'm only one person saying that, okay? Now, between, right next to Sammy's house, where Pine Tree meets Candlewood, I moved here 5 years ago. There was a 25 speed limit sign, so faded that no one could see it. But they don't pay attention anyway, so it's no big deal. And I just noticed a few months ago that they finally replaced the 25 speed limit sign. And nobody pays attention to the speed limits or the stop signs. And so what I want to say, from me walking my dog, and I'm only one person saying this, that this neighborhood cannot accommodate 20, 30 more cars. Now, okay, I live at Pine Tree, and I have the end unit, okay? I don't have a car. I don't have a car. And I cannot tell you, and I don't go to the rest of Pine Tree. I just come out of my apartment and go where I'm going. But very often, the building that I live in, 17, is full of cars. And the person that lives next to me is only one person. The person that lives next to her is only one person. And the person that lives at the end is only one person. And that whole thing is full. Where are the cars coming from? They're visitors. They're visitors. So if Pine Tree parking is full, there's my point. You know, all these people coming to the neighborhood, everyone has guests. And like John was saying, or other people, that I walk and I see 3 cars in everyone's driveway and cars parked on the street. They have their work vans. You know, a lot of people have vans and they're parked wherever. Some people have boats even that are parked in the driveway. So they don't have room for the cars in their driveway, so they have to park on the street. And the congestion will just be too bad, aside from the fact that people speed, they don't pay attention. It doesn't matter what time of day. It doesn't matter about the surveys. It just doesn't matter. So I'm saying that the traffic, this neighborhood cannot accommodate the cars and the traffic, whether it's parking or speeding or whatever. And there's no sidewalks. I can't walk on the sidewalk with my dog, and yet people scream at me. The other day when it was snowing, and it was snowing fast, and I'm walking in the street with my dog, and some guy yells at me to get on the sidewalk. What sidewalk? Done.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Roger Kuhn, and I live on 41 Fieldcrest, right here on the other side of the school. I think what we have to do is ask, who does this really benefit? Because there's a lot of people here that it doesn't. There's one person right here. It's not benefiting the community. Nobody here wants this. And if there's going to be something to put in for low-income housing, I don't think anybody here is really against that. If it's done that it's not going to jeopardize lives, become such a contested argument. And I know some of the facts that were given, the attorneys were kind of cherry picking the stats that they wanted and ignoring the other ones. And I hope you don't ignore the facts. And the outpouring of people who don't want this in their neighborhood, don't want this in their backyard. So please take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a little nervous, but my name is Herman Lammertz. My name is Herman Lammertz, and I have property on Bloomfield. I may take a little bit of a different tact here, but listening to Mr. Fallon, though, he proposed some good arguments, though, but I think most of the arguments, though, were basically on code. You know, the fire department, the code for the fire department is good, and Department of Labor and the Department of Transportation, Department of this and Department of that, though, and I think it goes beyond just letting everybody here know that the building, is code compliant. At one point, there were 70 people here, and I don't know if that carries any weight with this panel, though, but I think it speaks a lot for the community. That area is 1- and 2-story buildings, all duplexes. Again, Mr. Braun stated that it's affordable, very affordable neighborhood. 20, 25 years ago, it was a drug-infested neighborhood. Very, very bad neighborhood. The police were called all the time, and since then it's become a wonderful place for people that don't have means, and also rent. Half of them duplexes, and property over there is rented, and the other half is owned. We're proud of our neighborhood. It's not Greenfield Hill, but it's all we own. Getting a little emotional, sorry. Mr. Fallon did say, though, that they had passed this Affordable Housing Act in West Haven and also in West Hartford, North Haven. And when I just looked at it in Google, I saw that the crime rate in West Haven is 93% higher than all the cities and towns in Connecticut. The crime rate in North Haven is 83% higher than the states in Connecticut. Now, it's probably very easy to pass affordable housing in those areas because the crime rate is so high, and it's very undesirable areas, though, but this is Fairfield. And I'm not knocking affordable housing, but if you're going to build some units, build it just for the affordable housing people and not for private ownership, if you have that conscience. Parking is an issue. We all talked about that. The gentleman for the traffic over here, his words were that there were 2 cars in a home, his exact words. I think the parking spaces allocated for 1.2, that's 40 spaces. People here are complaining about 5 spaces on the street, which brings up to 27. That's 40 units. I guarantee you, anybody with a partner will have 2 cars in that house. You're looking at 40 spaces, not 27 spaces. For some good arguments as to why the parking situation is going to be difficult for 27 spaces. It's very, very difficult for 40. I drove around the neighborhood just for giggles before this meeting here. And there's three large complexes within a block and a half of each other. There's the Campbell Townhouses, there's 12 units there. There's the Bloomfield Commons, which is across the street from us. It's 8 units. It's not a pretty sight. It's about 4 stories, underground parking. And the houses there are 1 story, or they're also 2 stories with about a 5-foot incline on the roof. Peak roof is an additional 5 feet, so you're looking at 25 feet. I wasn't aware of the Bloomfield Commons being negotiated here at the commission, but it's something I wish I would have, stepped up to. And around the corner is a place called the Pine Tree Apartments. There's 50 units there, so we're looking at 70 units within a block and a half. Now, I really don't care if somebody says, though, well, you already have 70 units there, why don't we put another 20? It's really unfair. We have our share of units, and a lot of those units are also affordable housing. Now, you've heard some good arguments about parking, and also you're going to have a sign that says only go to the right. Well, it's 200 feet, towards the quickest way towards Black Rock Turnpike. I live there. I wouldn't take a right and go an hour or a mile around the circle to avoid a 200-foot exit, especially if I'm late for work. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to take a right. Sorry. I speed, and I'm not irresponsible, but I do tend to drive fast. My wife will tell you that, and I have that on occasion in that area, so I really don't care what survey has been done, but I'm guilty as well. But the different tact I want to take, though, is something that deals with some numbers here. I could be totally wrong, totally off base here. But I'm looking at this from a different tact. Let's say an apartment goes for $225,000. I'll do the math for you, so it's quite easy. Let's say an apartment goes for $225,000. Let's say the appraisal rate is 70%. That means that the town's going to appraise these places at $157,000. At a mill rate of 25.86, that was in 2018, I don't know what it is now, but that would come to about a property tax of $4,000 per apartment. So you're going to get $4,000 per apartment. Times 70 units, town of Fairfield is going to make $280,000 for these apartments. Costs $30,000 to put a kid through school per year. If it's 2 kids per family, times 70 units, you're looking at $4.2 million. So the town spends $4.2 million and generates $280,000. Let's say it's 1 kid per family. Town generates $30,000 times 70, which is $2.1 million. And the town brings in $280,000. If you have 2 kids per school, 2 per apartment, which is unlikely, but that's the average, because we're talking about averages here, right? 1.2 cars per unit. You can afford 4.7 kids. That's a break-even point. 70 units, 4.7 kids will break even for the town. If you only have 1 kid per unit, you can afford 9.3 kids. That's $280,000. Now, I know affordable housing isn't really an issue here, a question of, doing the right thing, though. But, when you look at some numbers here, I mean, $4.2 million generating 280, or $2.1 million generating 280. It's a bit more of a burden, in the town than one would expect. I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying, but 9 kids. 9 kids. Town can afford 9 kids. That's it. Going back to the neighborhood, the neighborhood has gone up in value, not much. It doesn't go exponentially. It's a very simple neighborhood, low to middle class. But I really can't see how affordable housing in our neighborhood will bring up the property values too much higher. you know, something that, you know, we're all simpletons. I mean, just look around us. We don't have a lot, you know, and I beseech you, please do the right thing. Please, 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 I beg of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're starting now. Please be quiet. Sorry, we need order.
Hi, my name's Wayne Garrison. I live at 3 Campfield Drive. With the traffic study they did, one of the things they didn't mention was they did mention that Beacon View and Trefoil come into one intersection, but they didn't mention that there's 2 other streets that also go into there, Bloomfield and Pioneer Court. With all those cars coming into that one intersection to go onto Knapp's Park Drive, the traffic is unbearable at times. And now he's talking about maybe 14 more cars every morning going through there. I can't pull out of my street in the morning because the cars are backed up all the way onto Beacon View. And the other concern I have is the snow removal, because I know they said they have to take it off property. Well, the ones on Bloomfield, their idea of taking it off property is to plow it onto the property across the street, and then the town has to come with a bucket loader and remove all their snow for them. And I'd like to know more about what they're going to be doing, because when that stuff melts on the street and freezes back up, it makes for very, very bad driving conditions in that area. And the traffic study, he said, was done at 8 o'clock in the morning. He should try doing it between 7 and quarter to 8 in the morning when the high school is using it as a cut-through. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Yep. Could I have a show of hands of how many other people would like to testify? Okay, great.
My name is Rob Merchant. Currently at 51 Fieldcrest, across the street here. I used to live at 12 Campfield. Actually, in the construction industry, I'm an electrician. We have a saying, everything looks good on paper. The study for the traffic is paper, that's all it is. I called the cops several times on people speeding through here. My son was born over on Campfield. We used to come here to play and cut through the path that's next to these properties. It's always a challenge. We started riding bikes through there. We've almost got hit a few times. Moving over here with the people coming through, everybody parks their cars here to get to the school. That's a traffic nightmare in the morning and the afternoon. It just doesn't make sense. It's not anything, there's no value for the neighborhood for this. Also, back here is a swamp. When Pine Tree was rebuilt, all the animals and such moved out. That year, there was an extra number of deer on the field here. My son got over 5 ticks on them, and people along that back up to this swamp on Fieldcrest have rats coming in their basements regularly due to the big projects like this. You're moving around a ton of water rebuilding these places. The whole idea is not good, and it doesn't benefit the neighborhood at all. It has, to use the lawyer's terms, no respect for the people of the neighborhood. This statute needs to stop because it's ruining Fairfield County all over from Greenwich right up the line. Just jamming places in. Just this so-called affordable housing. If it's that important, make the whole place affordable. You might lose money, but if that's what you're concerned about, rebuild the place. It's a sin what you're doing to your own neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is George Zaharis. I live on 36 Beacon View Drive. That home has been in my family for 50 years now. So right now we have 2 traffic studies. We have one that was paid for by the developer and the other one that was done by the police department. Now I spoke to Captain Calamaris last week about the traffic study that was done by the police department. And he compared the 2.
Excuse me, who is it you spoke to?
I spoke to him last week, yes.
Who is that?
Captain Calamaris from the Fairfield Police Department. Now, he compared the 2, and he actually had a kind of a laugh about how inaccurate he saw the developer's traffic study to be. He was supposed to be here today to testify, to talk. He texted me earlier, and he told me that he couldn't make it because some police matters that came up. But I think it's very important that we hear from him before any decision is made. Okay. Now, as far as the parking spaces that are being removed and the bushes, well, those are all right in front of my house. Okay. Now, the parking spaces that are being removed are about 200 feet away from my driveway. So I have tenants downstairs. I live there as well. Any guests that come over would have to walk 200 feet if they find a parking space over there. I still don't know how they're going to enforce that. I don't believe they will. So just so you know that it's not right across the street from the development. It's 200 feet away from the development. Now, as far as my bushes are concerned, I was down at Town Hall. I spoke to several people. One of them was Scott Lehman. He's the Town Hall surveyor. I brought in an old survey map, the original survey for my home, and he didn't seem to think that my bushes needed to be removed. He's like, I don't know who told them that. I don't know where they got their information from, where it makes them think that they could ask me to cut down my bushes. No one has talked about that yet. It just seems that they're just saying this, but they're not telling me, you know, how they justify it. I understand the right of way, but I measured it myself according to the survey map. My bushes are within my property, and according to what I measured, they seem like they're okay. I also have a surveyor coming to my house later on this week, and he's going to resurvey the property just to verify what I found out and what Scott Lehman told me. So those are some questions I think that should be asked before anyone forces me to cut down my bushes. Now, as far as this entire development, I mean, a lot of things have been touched on. It's not a good idea. You know, all over Connecticut, all over Fairfield County, these large developments are being moved into small neighborhoods, okay? And when do we say enough is enough? When do we determine how many extra cars are going to be unsafe, all right? And how do we determine that? I mean, is it going to be when someone gets run over by a car, a kid riding his bike, or someone taking a walk down the street gets injured or killed? Is that when we're going to say, oh, maybe we pushed the limits a little bit too far? So these are some questions that need to be asked. I think everyone that came up here earlier made valid points. And it's something that you guys should seriously consider. It's a small neighborhood. It's already congested. I mean, if you look at the videos, and I know you did, Channel 12 News and John's video, you could see cars, buses, large construction trucks driving by. And that was just a small period. That wasn't even the worst of it. And that was actually a slow day. So it is a safety concern. The fact that they're doing the right-hand turn only and removing parking spaces tells you that they know it's a safety concern and they're just trying to find ways around it. And not a good idea. And that's what I have to say. Oh, I think that it's important that we do hear from Captain Calamaris and as well as find out, you know, what the situation here is with my bushes, because if they don't have to be removed, how does that affect their line of sight? And if they do have to remove, what's to keep me from turning my front yard into a parking lot and parking work vans there and affecting that line of sight? So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Alex Durrell, 64 Woodcrest Road and RTM 3. I didn't have a speech prepared like I did for High Street, which I waited 9 months to finally give. But it sounds like the crux of the situation is this is a safety hazard. And based on Dr. Braun, it sounds like it's an environmental hazard. Based on Joe, the realtor, and I think the soft talker, it sounds like a vehicular hazard. And based on Ms. Gallo and the Yankee fan, I may be getting people mixed up. I'm a Red Sox fan, I'm sorry. It sounds like it's an economic hazard. I mean, what more of a hazard do you need? I mean, let's connect the dots. I hope that you can make a stand and help our side of, you know, this part of Fairfield. We need it. We don't need that. We need people like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
name is Michael Flato, and I'm a homeowner at number 3 Beacon View Drive. I've lived here in Fairfield since I was 5 years old, and on Beacon View Drive since 2012. In that time, I've come to regard our town as an open and welcome community, both socioeconomically and culturally diverse. So when I read in the local news media that there was neighborhood opposition to this proposal, I was surprised and frankly disgusted. For one resident of my cherished neighborhood to muddy the waters by spreading rumors and distributing flyers full of half-truths and innuendo is quite upsetting. We as Fairfielders have a moral responsibility to dismantle the ongoing repercussions of redlining and other racist zoning policies of the last century. And studies have shown that one of the best ways to do this is the development of affordable housing. Research has also shown that living in a diverse community promotes growth and development for all members of the community, and so increasing the level of economic diversity in Fairfield is vital. We do have a responsibility to increase accessibility to our community for vulnerable individuals, but helping those individuals will also expand respect and understanding among those in positions of privilege. All that said, I recognize that the committee is here tonight to evaluate the proposal based on its objective merits. And I've read that the only legitimate concern would be for the potential increase in traffic. A number of people have stated that Beacon View Drive is already a busy street, which to me seems quite dubious. Anytime I'm out in my front yard doing yard work, I see at most a single car pass every 5 to 10 minutes, compared with Knapp's Highway, which has the same speed limit, but several cars pass every minute. Additionally, research has disproved the common myth that these types of housing developments significantly increases traffic congestion. On the contrary, access to affordable housing decreases overall congestion in our region, and as we heard earlier, the study submitted to this commission confirms that the increase in vehicle trips is negligible. There's been a lot of talk about a garage tonight as if that type of structure is inherently unsafe, and the attitude that implies that low-income residents are automatically criminals and would use their own residence as some sort of base for crime is deeply disturbing to me. It's true that we should be building these developments throughout our town and not only in the Tunxus Hill area. But as a start, I would be happy to welcome these new residents to my own neighborhood. That's why I'm here to express my support for the proposed development at 15 to 21 Beacon View Drive. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, no comments, please. No one commented negatively on what you said. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Joe Scatino. I live on, I have a property on Beacon View Drive as well. And, you know, if a project is set before the town and, you know, 10 to 15 people on the board to decide whether the project should go forward based on all the criteria. And, you know, if it fits inside the parameters of that, then, and you approve it according to the laws and your regulations, then there should be no issue. Because someone doesn't like the way something looks, there's a lot of homes in that area that don't look the same. It's changing. Look at Black Rock Turnpike. It looks like the Post Road, you know, so, you know, the town is growing, and yeah, we are getting crammed in, but if he's if somebody is within the guidelines that you set forth, then they should be able to do it. And you shouldn't have personal attacks on somebody who's trying to follow the law and, you know, improve the quality of their life and their family and follow the American dream, so to speak. So, you know, I'm in favor of anything that is within the guidelines of the town and improves the quality of the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
How you guys doing? My name is Sanat Organic. I lived on Beacon View since '99. I respect everybody's opinion here. Everybody brings valid points. On my end, I almost feel like it's a stagnant neighborhood. Nothing goes on, nothing changes. All you see is brick houses, small houses. I don't live in a large house. I don't come from money, just like everybody else here. But I do think there's a time for change and something new in the neighborhood, something to spark a little bit of interest. You know, and everybody brings valid points, you know, as far as parking and traffic. But I think something like this would do good for the neighborhood. Jobs, different people coming in, some people going out, and that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Last chance.
I'm Tom Stavros. I live at 116 Myro Street. I came in late to the meeting, but I heard only the opposing, so I am on the opposing side, only because I own a home on Campfield Drive, and I see we'll call it the street, what do they call those border lines? They're only allow so much for cars to go by, and there's cars parked on either side. So I see that as a serious risk to pedestrians. And I think that we're going to get more cars from this new development. And the other one thing, I studied in soils a long time ago, and I'm not expert on it, but I think anytime you disturb the ground, you disturb the way the water flows. We have what they call spring water in our area and Campfield Drive. There's quite a bit of water flowing up, even though it's on a higher ground. And the same thing happens where we disturb the ground, and I think we should be cognizant of the way we develop Fairfield. I'm getting now in wider outside the parameters of this project, but I think we should consider how much we want to develop Fairfield. We need some undeveloped. Just leave it as is and not push people closer and just because for the sake of one statute, 8.30. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Last chance again. I don't see anyone, so Mr. Phelan.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I am ready and able to sum up. I just wanted to get the commission's sense of whether you're going to leave the hearing open, because if you're going to leave the hearing open, and I completely understand your discretion to do so, I'd like to not bifurcate my close.
Well, I think we would like to leave the hearing open to investigate the information from the police. Right.
Also, do you think we need some wetlands hydrology information?
We can't hear you.
Do we just oh, I didn't turn it on, I'm sorry. Do you think we need some wetlands drainage hydrology report?
You have, with all due respect, Commissioner, I'm fully in understanding of continuing the matter, and in light of the conversation tonight, having whatever follow-up on the police study of the sightline. But in fairness to your engineering department, they've vetted this substantially, and I just want to defend Ms. Pooley. I don't think you need anything further from them. My thoughts.
Well, there was an easement mentioned that goes under this property.
There is no easement. I will address that in my close. There's no easement running. We are giving an easement at Ms. Pooley's request over our property to the town, but we're not relying on any easement from any adjacent property. But that will be part of my close.
So we're going to leave this open.
I just want to let Mr. Brayman know I didn't forget. North Haven Opportunities, Affordable Housing, Inc. versus North Haven P&Z. It's a Superior Court case, and the citation I have is 1999 WL 73919.
73909.
73919. 1999 WL 73919.
February 25th? Yeah, so we will be continuing this hearing on February 25th, approximately a month from now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That finishes us for tonight.